When we remember a time, we remember moments. A kaleidoscope of the sights, the sounds, the emotions that remind us of the way we were. Our world. It's about time. Tonight, speaking out in the summer of 1963, here are Linda Ellerby and Ray Gandolf.
For the next hour, think of your television set as a time machine.
And clear your throat. Tonight we're going to speak out and sing along.
Welcome to the summer of 1963. With the wind at our back and the sun on our face, we are poetry in motion in a little deuce coupe. Or so some of us like to think. But now there is a poet who tells us the wind, it is a-changin', and speaking out as it's blowing in. What a time.
In the summer of 1963, President Kennedy made a triumphal visit to Europe, inspired a nuclear test ban treaty, and watched the South Vietnamese government of President Diem, whom he had supported, collapsing of its own corruption. And he was moved by circumstances to take the high moral ground in black America's fight for equality. He wasn't quite ready to speak out that spring in May when the situation in Alabama got nasty.
Birmingham. Police used dogs and water hoses to turn back those who would exercise their civil rights as Americans. The rage within breaks out. Civil rights organizer Baird Rustin believes this is when America finally begins to wake up about what is going on. And the alarm clock is television.
Birmingham was, in a way, television's greatest hour in the United States because it brought into the living room, night after night, for a number of days, the brutality of maintaining segregation. It brought to the people of America the fact that we were, in fact, two nations, not one.
And senators, congressmen, D.T. the cow. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall.
Singing is another way to speak out, and songwriters would come to be the poets of our social conscience, like Bob Dylan.
We'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing.
But it is another Dylan song that gets the attention of another singer, Peter Yarrow.
Albert Grossman, who was the manager of Peter, Paul and Mary and Bob Dylan, brought us a little record, a demo they called it, to the Gate of Horn where we were performing. The moment I heard the song, I said, that is it.
Peter, Paul and Mary released Blowin' in the Wind in June. It will become a million seller and an anthem of civil rights, especially to white liberals.
How many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
But Alabama isn't listening to any wind but its own. And the president, he has not made civil rights a priority. Not yet. But he'll have to now. He will have little choice.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
The new governor of Alabama, George Wallace, had come into office pledging to stand in the schoolhouse door in order to keep Alabama schools white.
In those days, if you had known the temper of the people, it was not against blacks, it was against the big omnipotent federal government usurpation of authority and taking away from the states.
This same hypocrisy has led to Alabama having the last totally segregated state university system in the country. But 2 black students have applied to summer school at the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa, and a federal judge has ruled in favor of admission. One of the students, James Hood. The other, Vivian Malone.
I was kind of readying myself, probably from a psychological point of view. I had, and to be quite frank about it, I did have some concerns and some apprehensions about could I make it there?
Wallace's answer is to reaffirm his promise to block the schoolhouse door with his own body.
Well, I believe that separation is good for the Negro citizen and the white citizen. And in that
What you're looking at is rare, behind-the-scenes footage, shot in Alabama and in Washington. The President and the Attorney General, Robert Kennedy, direct the federal government to prepare for a showdown.
I thought that we'd come up with a plan about how we're going to handle the governor. I don't like the idea of picking him up.
It is so fantastic in this day and time to even be trying to handle a governor of a sovereign state just like a common lawbreaker.
Wallace is defying the law and is more concerned about protecting the university than protecting the law.
We're not going to let anybody desecrate this university. I just want you to know that's my orders. We're going to keep the peace.
And Deputy Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach and federal marshals are there to see the federal government keeps its word to the two students.
The governor said he didn't want violence, and I had no reason to doubt his sincerity in saying he didn't want violence. At the same time, much of what he said and did would be calculated to get people very excited and very upset. So we simply didn't know.
People from the Justice Department prepare Hood and Malone for what will happen and how they should behave and dress.
You should dress as if you were going to church, for example, modestly, neatly, or like you're going to school the first day.
The students are ready. The university is ready. The campus is barricaded. State troopers enforce a curfew. Students take a pledge of nonviolence. Now, Robert Kennedy and Katzenbach have to deal with the cocky bantam governor and his cockamamie promise.
You're going to have to play it a little bit by ear, but I wouldn't take him too, almost dismiss him as being rather a second-rate figure for you.
On the morning of June 11th, as he's driving the two students to school, Katzenbach gets a message from Bobby Kennedy. Call now.
So we stopped at a shopping center, and I got on a payphone and called him, collect. And he said, what are you going to say to the governor? And I said, I don't really know. I haven't written it out. I hadn't had time to. And he said, well, the president wants you to make him look ridiculous. And I said, fine, have you got any ideas as to just how I do that? And he said, no, but that's what the president wants.
Ready or not, here they come.
You know, it's difficult, if you've never been through anything like that, to imagine when you walk on campus and you see the guards out there with their bayonets and the guns and all of this. There's just no way that I could imagine what that was going to be like. I really couldn't.
Wallace marches to the door to keep his promise. It's nearly 100 degrees out. Katzenbach has left the two students in the car to avoid a direct confrontation between them and Wallace.
Yeah, but is he talking directly to the governor, Katzenbach?
The unwelcomed, unwanted, unwarranted, and force-induced intrusion upon the campus of the University of Alabama today of the might of the central government offers frightful example of the oppression of the rights, privileges, and sovereignty of this state by officers of the federal government.
Governor, I'm not interested in a show. I don't know what the purpose of the show is. I am interested in the orders of these courts being enforced. That is my only responsibility here.
I found it annoying, very annoying, that the governor would stand there and refuse this, all for political purposes, would turn down two young students who qualified and were admitted to that university. And that it just made me somewhat angry.
So far as going into University of Alabama, George Wallace knew we were going just as we did. So, you know, that's, for a while there, I thought, you know, surely he's not going to really do that. You know? But he actually physically carried out his pledge to do that.
The governor plays out his hand to the end. Robert Kennedy asks his brother, the president, to federalize the Alabama National Guard.
So will you issue the proclamation now and sign it? The executive order, yeah. Right now? Okay, okay.
By mid-afternoon, 100 National Guardsmen have arrived on campus. They're under the command of General Henry Graham.
There was some special forces units there on the campus. I took a platoon of them, and we were all dressed out in battle attire, and we started marching toward the registration hall. And when I was within about a block, I could see this enormous gathering of people, and I quickly realized that they were not demonstrators, but they were the media people. So I halted the platoon and took 2 sergeants, and we took off our steel helmets and put on the old soft caps, and we then walked up to the entry.
I wasn't there to cause trouble. I went ahead and did exactly what the General Graham said do. When they nationalized our National Guard, he came by and saluted and says, "It is my sad duty." And so I stepped aside.
Segregation forever has become an empty slogan at the University of Alabama. Black students are a fact. And while the iron is hot, President Kennedy decides to speak out to the nation on civil rights.
President Kennedy had been thinking and preparing most of the spring of 1963 that the time had come for him to take a bold stand on civil rights.
Special Counsel Ted Sorensen helped Kennedy write the speech.
But the stand taken by George Wallace at the University of Alabama proved to be the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back.
That all men are created.
Kennedy says that racial discrimination is not only a legal issue, but is a matter of conscience as well.
We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the scriptures and is as clear as the American Constitution. The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities. Whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated.
I watched President Kennedy's speech.
Myrlie Evers, wife of civil rights leader Medgar Evers.
I know that I felt a sense of relief and a sense of pride, and maybe for the first time in a very long time, feeling like I was an American.
We'll be demonstrating here until freedom comes to Negroes here in Jackson, Mississippi.
As the field director for the NAACP in Mississippi, Evers has been threatened, his house bombed. Less than 7 hours after President Kennedy makes his speech, Evers is shot in the back from ambush after he puts his car away in the garage. Less than an hour later, Medgar Evers is dead.
He spoke words of truth.
Medgar had said that if his dying would help remove the problem of racism and injustice and could motivate people to move forward for that, then if he would die, it would not be in vain.
He fought for freedom all of his life, but they laid Medgar Evers in his grave.
Medgar Evers, a World War II combat veteran, is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. In Jackson, Mississippi, 158 people are arrested for protesting his murder. 1 man is arrested for his murder. He will be tried twice. Both trials will end with a hung jury. Both juries will be all white. Come back to the summer of '63 when pop music speaks out and says little.
Our world continues with Speaking Out in the Summer 1963.
They wait, they stalk, and they shake the desert sands, all teamed together to do one thing: win. Bill Elliott and his Coors-smelling Thunderbird, Tom the Mongoose McEwen and his Coors Funny Car, and Ivan the Iron Man Stewart's Coors Off-Road Champion. When the smoke clears, Coors is the one.
Introducing new, improved, professional strength Effordent Denture Cleanser. Stronger than ever. Removes more stains, more plaque, and kills germs. For a professional looking clean, get new, improved, professional strength Effordent.
poison ivy, insect bites. You can count on Caladril for relief. In fact, Caladril can help stop almost any itch, as long as you can reach it.
Of all leading brands, only Caladril contains Benadryl, the most recommended topical antihistamine for itch.
7 years today. When Jim and I started out, we were on a tight budget. And that's when I discovered Suave. After Jim got a promotion, I tried those expensive shampoos and conditioners. Know what? They weren't any better. They just cost more. So I came back to Suave. I don't have to spend a fortune on my hair. Suave just makes me look like I do.
Try Suave Mousse, Hairspray, and Gel for beautiful styles and look like you spent a fortune on your hair.
If you're interested in a great value in small pickups, here's good news from Ford. Right now on Ranger, America's best-selling small pickup, you can get 3.9% financing or up to $1,000 cash back. Combine the cash back offer with a special option package and save up to $2,111 on Ranger. Great value programs also offered on Bronco 2s. Take advantage of these savings now. See your Ford dealer. Ford Ranger, built fun tough.
What do teenagers want to know about AIDS?
Tomorrow, the Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop, answers teen questions about AIDS.
We'll also talk with Ryan White. 15 years old, he has AIDS, and his story is alarming.
And Peter Coyote, he's in a new movie with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Tomorrow, here on Good Morning America.
Welcome back to June, July, and August of 1963. We were still buying American cars then, and more Americans were buying the Chevy Impala than any other make or model. Cost about $3,000. On the radio, $48 extra, $57 for push button. White folk singers were big that summer. Peter, Paul, and Mary, Dylan, Seeger, Baez, singing out against racial injustice. Nobody in the pop music mainstream was speaking out for or against much of anything. Rock and roll hadn't turned hard yet, let alone acid or heavy. But it was beginning to get just a little bit sassy.
Come on now, let's hear a roar. Sweetest sound, Leslie Gore.
Sassy, more like selfish, spoiled spunk. But then we were a spoiled generation, at least those of us who were white were. We agreed with Leslie Gore, who was still a high school student herself when It's My Party was released.
You talk about Johnny giving Judy his ring. I don't even know if trading rings is a custom among kids anymore, but it certainly was then. I chose songs even though I came out of, I listened to a lot of jazz and I listened to a lot of wonderful lady singers. I had to relate to a lyric in order to be able to sing it, and I guess at 16 I related very strongly to It's My Party.
And It's My Party became the #1 pop song, a tiny pre-feminist squeak. That's what it was.
There was an attitude in songs that hadn't come up yet. In that particular song, it was an attitude of independence and even, gosh, if I want to be unhappy, that's my right and I will be. There was kind of a quasi-bitchiness about her thing, and I think for the most part we weren't used to hearing that in records. People like that attitude.
Lang pretty much sums up our uncomplicated concentration on boys. And uncomplicated songs were sung by the girl groups.
I met him on a Monday and my heart stood still. They do run, 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 they do run, run. Somebody told me that his name was Bill. They do run, 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 they do run, run. Yes, my heart stood still. Yes, his name was Bill. And when he walked me home, they do run, 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 they do run, run.
Be My Baby, a classic girl group song. And Wish. Ellie Greenwich co-wrote it.
What happened was I was married to Jeff Barry, and unfortunately for songwriters, you tend to talk in titles very often. And one summer we were on the beach, and we talked in baby talk sometimes, but we were very young and innocent, I must say. And we said to one another, I really love you to be my baby. And I said, what a simple, straight-ahead title. We should really use that for something. I think the girl group sound was a sound of street innocence. There was a street, tough, yet innocent quality that went along with not only the sound of that record, but the way they looked. I mean, these girls, you might take them home to mother, but then again, maybe not.
On the West Coast, the music was al fresco and wet. A 100,000 Southern Californians went surfing on those summer weekends. Ho-daddies, hot dogs, and hedonists with their own music. The Beach Boys. All surf music sounded pretty much the same to the unpunctured eardrum. Even experts had trouble judging potential. Beach Boy Brian Wilson, a prolific writer, gave one song to a couple of high school buddies, Jan and Dean, to record. Dean Torrance didn't much like it.
He wrote about half of it, then decided that it wasn't exactly what he had in mind, wasn't as good as he thought it was going to be, so he thought, hey, I'll give it to my best friends, since it's kind of a pukey song anyway. Then he went on to finish Surfin' USA, which actually we wanted that one. If given our druthers, we tried to talk him into giving us Surfin' USA, but he kept that for himself. So he gave us Surf City and said, well, you know, this one's almost as good, so okay.
Surf City became the first song of its ilk to reach #1 on the charts. It was a theme song for the young, tan, blonde creatures who infested the California beaches looking for the big wave.
Surf City came out, and Surfing USA, and Surfing Safari, and we couldn't even find a place to park, let alone once you parked and once you walked a couple of miles carrying your board, then you put it in the water, and then where'd you paddle to? There just wasn't any room. Literally, there were, on every wave, there were territorial wars going on in every wave.
Like any subculture, surfers had their own lingo. A beginner was a kook or a gremmy. A heavy was a really great wave. The boys wore baggies. The girls a kind of sedate bikini that wouldn't have raised an eyebrow on the Riviera. Ann Cole of California made them.
There were magazines that weren't even allowed to feature bikinis in them because they were considered indecent exposure. And the young people said, we're wearing bikinis. They're more fun, they're more freedom-loving, they allow our bodies to be exposed more, and there's nothing unnatural about the body, and why not let it all, show? But when you look back on them and you see these bikinis suddenly today, they look like they could be called Mother Hubbards, if you will, because they really didn't look brief at all.
Well, along the coast past Malibu, I make it every day after school is through.
With a new fad, fadding right in its own backyard, Hollywood was quick to cash in. Beach Party, released that August, starred Frankie and Annette.
We got an early start.
We're gonna have a ball,
We're gonna ride the surf.
and that ain't all.
Frankie Avalon, Annette Funicello, they got together and it was just exactly the lifestyle, basically, the way it really was.
Dick Dale played the guitar in Beach Party.
And the kids saw that, and they said, there's got to be something more to life than just back over here and fighting and whatever we don't have. Look, they got a world of happiness, fun in the sun, and that's where the term came, fun in the sun.
The Grammys and the Hooters never go. Never go. I said the Grammys and the Hooters never go. Never go.
Riding off into the perpetual sunset of surfer heaven, beach boys and girls are unaware the next sound they hear blowing in the wind will come all the way from the proletarian backwaters of Liverpool, England. In a shrinking world, sound carries. Or as Bob Dylan says, used to go like that, now it goes like this.
Last night I said these words to my girl.
Generally, it's only in Europe that you hear that sound this summer. It's not the Beatles that will bring the president to Europe. Come back to Berlin.
Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, things go better with Coca-Cola, things go better with Coke. Life is much more fun when you're refreshed.
A wide roll-on. A wide roll-on. Did they make them?
Introducing Lady Speed Dry Antiperspirant, the only wide roll-on. Ordinary roll-ons are narrow. Lady Speed Dry is wide for complete coverage with every stroke.
Goes on faster and easier than ordinary roll-ons. Lady Speed Dry is great. Helps keep me dry and odor-free all day.
New Lady Speed Dry Antiperspirant, the only wide roll-on.
By Menon. It's your call. You can enjoy the fresh baked quality from Domino's Pizza or take your chances with the Noid. You can have pizza made to your order, or you can count on our famous 30-minute delivery, or you can taste the quality from Domino's Pizza, so avoid the Noid. Domino's Pizza delivers. Call now.
Alaskan king crab from Glacier Bay and the great taste of Old Milwaukee beer.
There's nothing like the flavor of a special place and Old Milwaukee beer.
Hey guys, it doesn't get any better than this.
Let me see the front page.
To write the words, make the plans that bring the future inside.
It's ready.
What about those dreams and set them down, set them in a whole new light.
From original to copy, electronic to print, what you see is what we do. Xerox, the leader in document processing, with machines and systems to create, copy, distribute, and file, to print or scan between paper and screen, to make ideas clearer and sharper, and make outputs outstanding. Document processing from Team Xerox.
We document the world.
Hello, Mother. Hello, Father. Here I am at Camp Granada.
Our world will be right back.
Entertaining. And they say we'll have some fun if it stops raining. I went hiking with Joe Spivey. He developed poison ivy.
Skydiving?
An invitation from Clay. Will it lead to a romantic adventure?
Breathtaking, isn't it?
Breathtaking.
Or tragedy?
We're having some trouble up here.
We're gonna crash.
All gotta jump.
Loving weekdays.
The success of the Red Hot Summer Sale is certain to keep Ford #1.
It sure looks that way to me. It's unbelievable. Great selection. Thunderbirds, Taurus, Aerostars, and Escorts. And now Tempos with 3.9 or 300 factory cash back. And one of the most popular Fords is the Ranger pickup, as low as $56.93 with applied cash back. But people are buying them as second cars. With 3.9 and 1,000 cash back, I can see why Ford's #1.
Biggest sale of the year, and it's ending soon. See your Northwest Ford dealer today.
Burning, itching, cracking, peeling. These are the symptoms of athlete's foot that can stop you in your tracks. But Desenex actually cures athlete's foot and puts you back in the running. Desenex, the classic cure for athlete's foot.
KEZI-TV, Eugene.
Welcome back to 3 months in the middle of 1963. A lot of the speaking out that summer was tentative. Vietnam was a lump in our throat, but not yet malignant. Hawks and doves were nestlings, just beginning to peep. Betty Friedan spoke out. Her book, The Feminine Mystique, was a bestseller, but there was no women's lib movement yet. We were speaking out boldly on civil rights. The president found his voice that summer. Martin Luther King would stir the nation. Freedom songs were blowing in the wind. It could be dangerous, though. Speaking out got Medgar Evers murdered.
There is more than one way to speak out. Inside this magazine, there is a silent scream. Can't hear it? Hear it now? It's a photograph of a Buddhist monk who set himself on fire to protest the stifling of dissent, a practice of his government, a government our government supports. He lives in South Vietnam, or did. We see the photograph, but do not hear the scream. Most of us are busy listening to other voices and looking in other directions, including up.
It's the last total eclipse until 1970, and scientists are making the most of it.
Dr. William Gooch watched it when he was 16.
During an eclipse of the sun, what's happening, of course, is the moon is passing between the Earth and the sun, and it's doing so very rapidly. You almost have to be devoid of a nervous system completely, not to stand there as this false night rushes in, and the black disk of the moon is framed by the atmosphere of the sun like a black hole in the sky, and not gasp or have some type of an emotional reaction. It is a very, very moving event.
The best advice for watching an eclipse of the sun is don't. No dark glasses are dark enough. A big cardboard box that works like an old pinhole camera is safe. You stand back to the sun and look at an image of the eclipse.
I just drop in the film.
Real camera, no pinholes.
Power wind.
The new Kodak Instamatic eliminates all that fiddling and clicks immediately with consumers. The new post office gimmick is a hard sell.
Welcome the zip code, learn it today. Send your mail out the 5-digit way. For a time
Now your mail will get zipped when it doesn't get zapped.
have the zip code.
In a national emergency, of course, you need real speed.
A new weapon is installed in the Pentagon, but it's a weapon of peace.
In August of 1963, the first hotline is installed between the United States and the Soviet Union. Virtually instant communication between the White House and the Kremlin. It can't do anything about planned aggression or duplicity, but it is protection from misunderstandings. Kennedy, who has always been a vigorous Cold Warrior, is waving an olive branch this summer. On June 10th, in a commencement speech at American University, he asked the Soviet Union to join this country in banning the testing of nuclear weapons.
The conclusion of such a treaty, so near and yet so far, would check the spiraling arms race in one of its most dangerous areas.
The Kremlin, fortress of communist doctrine, is the setting of an historic event, the signing of an atom test ban.
On August 5th, with Nikita Khrushchev looking on, representatives of the Soviet Union, Britain, and the United States agree not to test nuclear weapons in the atmosphere, in space, or underwater. A few days later, Secretary of State Rusk and Khrushchev test a shuttlecock in inner space. Game Khrushchev.
Decked out in his Ukrainian blouse, the Russian leader defeated the American. But that's the life of a diplomat.
The most famous diplomat this summer is John Kennedy. At the end of June, Kennedy arrives in Europe. With the signing of the Hotline Agreement and the American University speech, Europeans see Kennedy as a peacemaker, a hero. For 10 days, he will enjoy an adulation he is not getting back home. Ted Sorensen accompanies the president.
He was having his troubles at home. His new position on civil rights was very controversial, encountering resistance in the Congress and the country. So the president found the enthusiastic reception he received in Europe a welcome change.
The high point is Berlin, site of the wall between East and West Germany. What had been a low point in U.S.-Soviet relations is now a clear moment of triumph for John Kennedy.
Don't be ashamed, darling, don't be ashamed. Thank you for all the joy and pain.
Julian Hildebrand is 17 years old at the time, and Kennedy...
He came right next to my house. He passed by. So I saw him there the first time, and it was kind of tears came into my eyes when I saw him first, this young president. See, in 61, there was built the Berlin Wall. And the only hope for the people from Berlin was America, was the Americans. They protected Berlin, and our big hope was that Kennedy, this young president, could do something for us, and we wanted to show him our respect, and we really loved this man.
Checkpoint Charlie. The president will stand looking at the wall dividing the two Berlins, and while Kennedy is moved to make peace with the communists, he remains anti-communist and committed to the security of Western Europe. Next, he goes to West Berlin City Hall.
There are many people in the world who really don't understand, or say they don't, what is the great issue between the free world and the communist world. Let them come to Berlin.
Kennedy's speech will owe a lot to an interpreter named Bob Lochner.
President Kennedy said I should write out on a slip of paper in German, I am a Berliner. And then we first went to Willy Brandt's office while hundreds of thousands were roaring outside, and President Kennedy calmly rehearsed this brief phrase for a couple of minutes.
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
When he said, Ich bin a Berliner, the Berliners were happy that the president showed a sign that I am with you. And whatever happens here, and if the Russians are going to go on more confrontation, we are here, the United States is here, and we are helping you.
The sound will follow him when he leaves Germany later that day.
When he boarded the plane in West Berlin, I was already seated. And as the door closed behind him and the last wave was waved, he turned to me and said, we'll never have another day like this as long as we live.
John Kennedy did not have long to live, but it was long enough to see another day, another crowd like that one, come back to 250,000 Americans and the March on Washington.
Our world continues with Speaking Out in the summer of 1963.
A-doo-dah, well, the boy genius. You trying to find out why Kentucky Fried Chicken is America's favorite chicken? Then pay attention, son. Folks just love going to the Colonel's because no one else makes chicken with that special blend of 11 herbs and spices. Any of this getting through to you, son? And of course, no one else's chicken is finger-licking good because nobody else knows the Colonel's secret formula. The secret formula! Kid's too smart for his own good.
Kentucky Fried Chicken, we do chicken right. It's the Subaru Value Celebration, the greatest Subaru deals in Subaru history.
Stop! That's one Subaru commercial you won't see the rest of. What's really important isn't hoopla, but a great deal on a great car, like up to $1,500 cash back on a Subaru. With the money you can save now at your Subaru dealer, you can have your own celebration.
Up to $1,500 factory cash back on a Subaru. Or now you can get Subaru's 3.9% financing. That's really cause for celebration.
Hello. With vacation time here, Ed and I would like to remind you that there is no better beverage for vacation activities than Bartles and James, either in the original version or Ed's new premium red. As for our vacation activity, we are learning to fly fish. This takes great skill and patience, not only just catching the flies in the first place, but also in getting them on the hook. We hope you will enjoy your vacation with Bartles and James, and we thank you for your support.
This weekend, 2 great movies on ABC. First on Saturday, James Caan and Marsha Mason find love.
What if we were to meet for, say, 5 minutes?
You don't think this is a weird thing to do?
Neil Simon's Chapter 2, Saturday, then Sunday.
I have been taking care of my son long before he met you.
I think you should leave.
I'm not going to leave.
Colleen Dewhurst, Farrah Fawcett. Between Two Women, a weekend of great movies on ABC.
Welcome back to the summer of 1963. It's late August. This is Washington, D.C. What's about to take place here is an historic assembly to change history. And when asked if it's ill-timed, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says he's never engaged in any direct action that wasn't. 14,000 demonstrators have been arrested in the South this summer. Now it's time to speak out for justice and freedom in the shadow of America's monuments to justice and freedom.
Freedom Now movement, hear me. We are requesting all citizens to move into Washington, to go by plane, car, bus, any way that you can get there. Walk if necessary.
John Lewis, one of the organizers of the march, was chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
We felt it was necessary to dramatize to the nation and to the world the plight of black people in the southern parts of the United States. And we felt we had to put pressure on the Congress, on the president, to pass a strong Civil Rights Act.
In June, President Kennedy had submitted a civil rights bill to Congress, and he's afraid that a mass rally now will be counterproductive, damage the bill's chances in Congress.
And he said, what you really want is the bill and not a great demonstration. And our position was, we don't believe we will get the bill without a great demonstration.
Kennedy agrees to cooperate quietly. A coalition of civil rights, labor, and religious organizations prepares for the rally and takes special precautions to keep it peaceful.
One simply calculates how every incident could occur and does what is essentially designed to stop it. For example, the major thing we decided was that we would have only black police inside the march policing, and only white police on the fringes where the Ku Klux Klan and other bigots were coming in, so that you reduce the possibility of violence by having whites arresting whites who misbehaved and blacks arresting blacks who misbehaved.
The day before the march, volunteers slapped together 80,000 cheese sandwiches.
Get on board, children, children, get on board, children, children, get on board.
And they get on board buses and trains, thousands of them from all over the country.
Get on board, children, children, get on board, children, children.
I've never been in any crowd situation where the sense of idealism, of love, was any higher.
Reverend William Sloane Coffin was the chaplain of Yale University.
We marched out at 5 o'clock in the morning in New Haven, and already among the New Havenites, there was that feeling.
The one thing I remember above all others is the press was around us, and they said, Mr. Rustin, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. You said there were going to be 250,000 people here. We don't see 5,000 people yet. Where are they all? I took a blank piece of paper out of my pocket and looked at it. I pulled my watch out and I looked at it and I said, gentlemen, everything is going according to schedule. I was terrified that we would never get the people. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, from every direction that you looked, you could see these people coming in cars, buses, on foot. It was absolutely exhilarating.
By mid-morning, there's a swarm of 90,000 people at the Washington Monument.
Let us begin quietly and orderly to move out and begin the march for freedom now.
Freedom! What do we want now? Freedom! Freedom! Freedom!
From the George Washington Monument to the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, black and white Americans proclaim and demand their equal rights. Before a crowd of about 250,000 Americans, the leaders of the march speak, and it is John Lewis who puts it most bluntly.
We're tired of being beaten by policemen. We're tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again, and then you holler, be patient. How long can we be patient?
It is a day when many different people come together in one cause.
I speak to you as an American Jew.
Rabbi Joachim Prinz is president of the American Jewish Congress, and he says,
we wanted the Jewish people to understand that their problem is not an isolated problem, but it's part of a general problem of people who are discriminated against because they are of another race.
And there are the celebrities. Harry Belafonte has brought them to Washington after he sold them on the idea of coming to Washington.
If any selling was done at all, it was to convince these people that their presence made a difference. It's not just enough for people to identify with fellow citizens. It would be very good for them to be able to identify with their heroes, with their heroines, to be able to see a Baldwin, a Burt Lancaster, James Garner, to see a Marlon Brando, to see a Diane Carroll, a Mahalia Jackson. She sang that day like I'd never heard Mahalia Jackson sing. And Dr. King had this look on his face as if something divine had all of a sudden intervened. I'm not too sure he wasn't inspired by all of that that made him give this day that special sense and that special sound in his voice.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
And what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says this day will ring in our ears and in our hearts. It will even change some minds.
Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring in Whitney Capital. Speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
I think it will be quite some time again before there shall ever be that kind of spiritual uprising in the hearts of people. The human spirit is like a flame. It flashes up and is soon gone, and you never know when that light and that flame will come again.
The flame that leaped up that day in Washington and burned so brightly for a while has flickered and faded, but it has not gone out. Come back to our world and some of the legacies of that summer of 1963.
Our world will continue in a moment with Speaking Out in the Summer of 1963.
An ingenious blend of exotic passion fruit, premium white wine, and natural fruit juices. The unexpected taste of Dewey Stevens, the wine cooler that's 1/3 less calories, 2/3 more fun.
When information is in the hands of just a few, you're at their mercy. You play by their rules. But we think people should be in control, not machines. So at AT&T, we're working to combine computers and communications so you can get the right information to the right people at the right time. as easy as using the telephone. AT&T, the right choice.
Tonight, hyperactive kids. New ways to treat them could head off big trouble later.
I went from throwing books onto the floor to robbing liquor stores.
2020 next.
Welcome back to the wind-up of the summer of '63. In 1987, any racial segregation in America is what we call de facto, a Latin phrase meaning in fact, but not in law. This wasn't the dream Dr. King described that day in Washington, but dreams are about possibility and the future is about reality. Here are some of the recent futures of the summer of '63.
They overcame a lot, those marchers, sloth and guilt and a fear of speaking out. They served their purpose well. But they did not overcome opposition to civil rights. Kennedy's bill languished in Congress for a year until his successor, Lyndon Johnson, pushed and coaxed it through in the summer of '64. And whites who thought the bill went too far and blacks who thought it didn't go far enough would shed each other's blood. But in 1983, a 20th anniversary march was held, and another 250,000 people turned out.
2 days after George Wallace stepped out of the schoolhouse door at Tuscaloosa, David McClattery stepped into the schoolhouse door at the Huntsville branch of the University of Alabama.
He went without a hitch. He went completely unaccompanied. Other students registered before him and after him, and he walked in the same way that they did.
As for Hood and Malone, the two students at Tuscaloosa, James Hood dropped out of school after 3 months. He later became a deputy police chief in Detroit. Vivian Malone graduated from the university. She now works for the federal government in Atlanta as an equal opportunity officer. In 1982, George Wallace was elected to a 4th term as governor of Alabama, and the majority of black voters voted for him.
So you support Governor Wallace?
Oh, hell yeah, who don't?
Well, he was a segregationist 20 years ago. Doesn't that worry you?
So the man's a politician, too.
A politician who survived his own mistakes and retired in 1986.
Goodbye.
In 1964, America was invaded by the British.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you something. I think you'll understand.
The Beatles and their countrymen who followed changed rock and roll forever. A lot of the old American groups went under, but the Beach Boys are still making waves.
Crocodiles, they snap their teeth on your cigarette. Foreign types with the hookah pipes.
Girl groups are in vogue again. Subtlety is not.
Walk like an Egyptian.
Peter, Paul, and Mary are still speaking out and singing the same old songs. Recently in the Philippines, in support of President Cory Aquino's government.
Justice and equality and peace. And God bless you.
There have been 2 total eclipses of the sun visible in the continental United States since '63, one in '70, one in '79. The next in 2017. On November 22nd, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. That night, thousands of West Germans marched in memorial procession to City Hall, where 150 days earlier, Kennedy had stood and spoken out for all to hear the words, "I am a Berliner." They would change the name of their square to John F. Kennedy Plaza.
Well, there it is the way it was in the middle of 1963. 3 men who stood tall that summer would be ripped out of our lives by assassins. They were imperfect men, those 2 Kennedys and a King, but somehow they could speak to the imperfect rest of us and say, we're going to do better, so can you. And we said, yeah. Maybe if there were people today saying things like that, we would listen to them too. Maybe there are people saying things like that and I just can't hear them. Maybe it's too noisy now or too comfortable. All I know is what Leslie Gore sang. It's my party and I'll cry if I want to, because Jack and Bobby and Martin aren't there.
According to pollsters Gallup and Harris, Kennedy got maybe 70% of the black vote in 1960, or put another way, had only whites voted, Nixon would have been president. Kennedy didn't seem to remember that real actively until '63. Some say it was Birmingham, the sight of a police dog attacking a black woman, that finally cured his amnesia and made him realize exactly what was blowing in the wind. Certainly it was soon after that that Kennedy, in a speech at Vanderbilt University, spoke out in support of nonviolent protest, saying it was in the, quote, highest traditions of American freedom. He said more, it was an important speech, and I was there. I was 18 years old, and that is the only excuse I can offer for recalling nothing at all about that speech, not a word the man said, till I read about it later, about 2 weeks ago. And so it goes. Also in the summer of 1963,
Britain's War Secretary John Profumo resigned after admitting that he had lied about his involvement with Christine Keeler, a call girl who was also involved with a Soviet spy.
a son, Patrick, was born to President and Mrs. Kennedy on August 7th. On August 9th, Patrick died.
Pope John the 23rd, the architect of reform in the Roman Catholic Church, died. He was succeeded by Paul VI.
David Ben-Gurion, the Prime Minister of Israel, resigned. He was succeeded by Levi Eshkol.
Paris celebrated the 800th anniversary of Notre Dame Cathedral.
Jack Nicklaus won the PGA Golf Championship.
In Nigeria, Dick Tiger knocked out Gene Fulmer to retain his middleweight championship of the world.
For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
Friday. He's got the action and you've got the spirit. Then it's National Lampoon's Class Reunion. 2 all-new movies on Friday.
An ABC News brief brought to you by Hefty Bags. Now from Washington, Barry Seraphin.
Good evening.
Get the year's best deals on the year's best wheels.
The Toyota Model Closeout Sale.
It's a factory-authorized sale for you from now till August 22. So what do? Get them now.
The Toyota Model Closeout Sale.
Cars, vans, and trucks to save you bucks. We're talking deals. Save thousands.
The Toyota Model Closeout Sale.
Your Lane County dealers are the ones to see. With a great selection, just take it from me.
The Toyota Model Closeout Sale.
Today.
It left its mark on the 60s, and the country will never be the same. Battles for civil rights tore the fabric of society from within. The Vietnam War shattered the nation from without. And in 1967, in San Francisco, a group of people gathered for what was soon known as the Summer of Love. I'm Tracy Berry. With photographer Bill Getz, we'll trace the evolution of the counterculture, all the way from the 1960s to Eugene today.
Our special report, Summer of Love Plus 20, continues this week on Eyewitness News. Come and see Eyewitness News live on location at the Lane County Fair, Tuesday through Friday, August 18th to 21st at 11:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m.
KEZI-TV, Eugene. When we remember a time, we remember moments. A kaleidoscope of the sights, the sounds, the emotions that remind us of the way we were. Our world. It's about time. Here are Linda Ellerby and Ray Gandolf.
For the next hour, think of your television set as a time machine.
Tonight we're going back a generation to a time we now tend to look at through rose-colored glasses with cracked lenses.
Welcome to our world. It's autumn 1957. And to quote the song, there's a whole lot of shaking going on. Yes, that grandfatherly gentleman, Dwight Eisenhower, is still president. But just when we thought we knew all the answers, someone seems to have changed the questions.
If social phenomena had sounds, the sound of school desegregation in the fall of '57 was the sound of dragging feet 3 years after the Supreme Court had held that segregated schools were intrinsically unequal. Little Rock, Arkansas had a modest plan to begin integrating schools gradually from high school down. By that September of '57, school officials and most of the townsfolk thought they were ready to accept blacks in a white school. They were wrong.
Central High, Monday, September 2nd, the last day before school was supposed to start. In this case, think of it as the quiet before the storm. This time, the noise inside would be drowned out by the noise outside. Central High was about to be integrated, and if only 9 of the more than 500 eligible black students chose to switch to Central High, there was reason. Nobody expected trouble until Governor Orville Faubus, running for re-election against 2 segregationists, found trouble to be useful politically. So with little reason to do so, Faubus ordered the National Guard and state troopers to surround Central High. Monday night, he went on television.
They will not act as segregationists or integrationists, but as soldiers called to active duty to carry out their assigned task.
Ernest Green was one of those 9 students and one of the many people to wonder just what Faubus was saying.
As he talked about all the impending violence that was going to occur, and he was doing this for the safety and the well-being of everybody in Little Rock, I thought to myself, he ain't talking about me. And I don't think he has my well-being in mind.
Elizabeth Huckabee, the school's vice principal for girls, was equally stunned.
I was just overwhelmed with that idea, the idea of soldiers of any sort around a school. It sounded like a foreign country to me.
Some, like Melba Patillo, another of the Little Rock 9, misunderstood the governor.
Even when we heard the announcement, who thought that he was putting the troops up there to keep us out? We thought, oh, what a nice man. Maybe he's putting them up there to help us in or whatever. But the point is, there was no realization that this man was declaring war, which in fact he was.
To this day, Orville Faubus disagrees.
Well, I didn't use the Guard for the purpose of protecting the students and putting them in the school because it was still contrary to state law, contrary to state constitution, and contrary to 85% of the sentiment that had been checked by a poll in the state. And second to that, it was a federal court order, and it was the federal government's responsibility to enforce its own court order, which I wanted them to do, and it had no difficulty from me.
But on Tuesday morning, September 3rd, the only troops or weapons in sight belonged to 320 Arkansas Guardsmen and state troopers who had come, as one said, to make sure Central High stayed off limits to Negroes. On that day, heeding the advice of the school board, the Little Rock 9 stayed home. Wednesday, September 4th. The Guard remained and was joined by a large crowd, there to see what happened when 9 young black American citizens, backed by the Supreme Court and a federal order, actually attempted to exercise those civil rights they actually had, despite a politician who happened to be governor.
The morning of the 4th, I got ready. I put my clothes on, and all the time I was doing this, I had just this awful feeling in my stomach, in the pit of my stomach, like apprehension, fear.
Terrence Roberts went to the school, and he went alone.
I can recall the wide open mouths and the glazed eyes and the attempts to spit at me over the shoulders of the reporters. And I could see them as I looked over, and I could hear, and I can still remember the kind of statements. A lot of obscenities, a lot of use of the word nigger, this kind of thing.
I drove up to the front of Central High School with my mother in a car, and I got out of the car, and the first thing that made my heart skip a beat was that it sounded like being at a football game. You know, that kind of rumble of noise that you hear when you enter a huge stadium or something where there's a big crowd. Finally, I stood on tiptoes to look over people's heads, to look across the street, and saw, you know, some others of Little Rock 9. And then that's when some people looked around and said, hey, we got us a nigger right here.
Melba's mother, Lois Patillo.
Somebody started chasing us, and I couldn't run as fast as Melba could, so I told her to run on and make it to the car.
Screaming at each other and I'll never before heard that blood-curdling sound in her voice, which was, go to the car, get out of here, go now. And we did, and we got out of there.
By refusing to allow black students to enter this school, Governor Faubus was putting states' rights ahead of federal law, and thereby challenging the president in a way he could not ignore. Slowly and reluctantly, Eisenhower was being drawn into a controversy that might force him not only to uphold federal law, but the very principle of integration itself. At that point, both sides began to scramble to find an acceptable solution.
On September 14th, with the black students still being denied admittance, Faubus met with President Eisenhower in Newport, Rhode Island. Faubus said he would obey the law of the land, and Ike said he believed him. But the National Guard stayed on duty for 6 more days until a federal court ordered Faubus to remove them. He did, and left the state on a business trip. He also left the problem of law enforcement in the fragile hands of the Little Rock Police Department. Monday, September 23rd, the 9 blacks tried again. Gail Weeks was a detective.
I was concerned about our ability to hold the line, so to speak. We did not have adequate personnel. We had absolutely no training in riot control. We were not equipped. We were assigned different locations around the school. We were already thin, and we, as a result of this, it even weakened us further because it spread us out in such a way that we couldn't adequately handle it.
When we went into the school, we went by private car. It just so happened at that same time there were 3 or 4 black newspaper reporters who were crossing the front of the school, and the mob out in front attacked them.
The students took advantage of the diversion to enter through a side door.
Someone had noted the blacks' entrance and had called out to the mob out on the street that the blacks were in.
The mob outside Central High now numbered about 1,000 sullen, angry people. Faubus, with no evidence to back him up, had claimed that integration would cause violence. Now the crowd was making that self-serving prophecy come true. Washington was keeping a close eye on things, and Harry Ashmore, the editor of the Arkansas Gazette, talked with the Deputy Attorney General on the phone.
There were mobs in the streets at that time. There were people roaming around the city. We were getting reports of outbreaks of violence. And I said, I think the situation is that the local authorities simply cannot handle it. It's perfectly clear that Faubus is not going to give many assistance. So I think my own view is that some federal intervention is going to have to follow if you're going to prevent this from deteriorating into a real mob violence, which hasn't happened yet, but the tension is here.
I do remember the real fervor with which the crowd was moving toward the school, and the shouts and the taunts and all that.
I remember somebody saying that they might have to hang one of the kids to get the other 8 out.
The word had gotten out that the school was going to be blown up, and you can't discount that sort of thing.
Finally, they got us out of our classes and said they didn't think that they could protect our safety.
And we got in these cars, and they said, keep your head down. And I remember as we rolled up out of this driveway, I remember all these hands reaching for this car, across the front, across the back, just hands and angry faces and hands, and people chasing this car, and this guy doing what he was told to do. He was told to keep driving, and he kept driving. And I remember I got out, and I thanked him for a ride home, and I should have said, thank you for saving my life.
Tuesday, September 24th. The mob is back in front of Central High in open defiance of the president, who had said the day before that he would use force if he had to carry out a federal court order. Now he has to.
I have today issued an executive order directing the use of troops under federal authority to aid in the execution of federal law at Little Rock, Arkansas.
John Eisenhower recalls his father's decision.
Well, Dad was not preaching morals to anybody. But he had a federal judge who had made a ruling. Federal judge made the ruling on that high school there. And Faubus was using the National Guard to prevent it. Well, okay. This is a civil war all over again. It's the supremacy of the United States over state government. So over went the 101st Airborne. It was that simple.
For the first time since Reconstruction, federal troops were in the South to protect the civil rights of blacks. Tuesday night, 1,000 soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division entered Little Rock. It was like cauterizing a wound. Die-hard segregationists and states' writers howled in pain, but much of white Little Rock welcomed the troops, and the 9 brave students rejoiced.
I remember watching television and watching those troops driving over the bridge into Little Rock, and I felt incredible.
I must say that I was somewhat relieved when the Federals came in, because they were finally accepting their obligation to enforce their own court order, and that relieved me of all this terrific responsibility for maintaining order and protecting lives and keeping the peace in a situation that had been difficult, to say the least, for some time.
Wednesday, September 25th.
I woke up the next morning. We had to be at Mrs. Bates' house by 8 o'clock because the Army was going to take us to school. That sounded, interesting. I'd never gone to school with the Army. We went to school in a station wagon. We were surrounded on both ends of the station wagon by Army jeeps with machine gun mounts and soldiers with rifles and bayonets drawn.
And I remember there were parades of people down each side of the street just looking at us. And I remember thinking my life's never going to be the same anymore. It's just not going to be the same.
Here. That's 3 times I run you out here. Now move out.
It was an entirely different sort of group from the National Guard. These were professionals, and highly trained professionals. The soldiers were placed much more thickly around the entire perimeter of the school. About every 4 feet, there was a soldier with a gun and a bed.
There was a phalanx of soldiers lined up on each side of the walkway from curbside to the school door, and we walked in the middle of that.
Well, I remember Terrence Robertson and I in the middle of all this. Is kind of high drama for 9 kids from Little Rock, with the helicopter flying over, all these troops out in front of the school, and the school steps, with the encirclement of troops around you. I said, well, I guess we'll finally get into school this morning.
Other people will remember Eisenhower as a man who played golf. I remember him as a man who cared enough about my brown bottom to send the troops, because without them, I would be dead.
Come back to the autumn of 1957. As the distance between black and white begins to shrink, the distance between young and old begins to widen. There is a new force in America. It has money, it has a voice, it even has a name. We call them teenagers.
One rockin' evening. That's a silver bullet.
This band sure is loud.
Oh, thanks, I just bought it.
Want to dance?
No, they got Coors Light.
You can't hear me, can you? I think you're beautiful. In fact, I think you look so hot in here, isn't it? Of course, it's not so much the heat as it is the humidity.
There's no slowing down with the silver bullet tonight. Introducing new, improved, professional strength Effordent Denture Cleanser. Stronger than ever. Removes more stains, more plaque, and kills germs. For a professional-looking clean, get new, improved, professional strength Effordent.
Poison ivy, insect bites. You can count on Caladril for relief. In fact, Caladril can help stop almost any itch, as long as you can reach it.
Of all leading brands, only Caladril contains Benadryl, the most recommended topical antihistamine for itch.
When Whirlpool asked me to talk about their customer commitment, I said, what am I going to say? And they said, now we've added a full-year replacement guarantee. When you buy any Whirlpool major appliance from a retail dealer, you'll be satisfied with its quality and performance, or we'll replace it free. I said, Whirlpool guarantees replacement free for a year? They said yes. I said, roll those cameras. I do have something to say.
Here at the International Kennel Club of Chicago's annual dog show, 2,271 of the finest dogs in America gathered to compete. And Calcan Dog Food proved itself once more to be the dog food of champions. The best Bichon Frise, the best Welsh Terrier, the best Samoyed, the best Newfoundland, the best Lab, the best Rhodesian Ridgeback. 77 best-of-breed winners were Calcan dogs, raised on Calcan, magnificently successful with Calcan. No wonder top breeders recommend it.
Testing. Hi, Max. You rang. He's just ahead of his time. It's the return of Max Headroom tomorrow.
Welcome back to the fall of 1957. My eldest daughter was born that summer, and my wife and I joined the first generation of parents without power. We were latecomers, the generation that had begun during World War II, when mobility and prosperity swept away the old rules and old roles. Those kids were teenagers in the fall of '57, and they were soon to be driving their own cars, not daddy's. They had their own music, rock and roll, and they were a market, a powerful economic force that spent millions of teenage dollars on everything from Clearasil to Corvettes. And most of them were white, but the music they were beginning to claim as their own was black. White America respected success, admired winners. And so, among the first black Americans to get respect, and once in a while rich, were those who succeeded in music or sports. Both were areas where whites could watch and not feel threatened. Althea Gibson might not be able to join the West Side Tennis Club in New York City, but she could play there for the U.S. National Championship and win it.
So on this particular court, when it was grass, here at Forest Hills, that I competed against Louis Bruff, four-time Wimbledon champion. And here I was, the first Negro to be on this court. And I had complete command of my game that particular match. I was serving like a dream. I was volleying like nobody's business. My overhead was devastating. And Louis Bruff couldn't pass me nowhere on this tennis court. So here I was, United States women's singles champion, and was presented the trophy by the then Vice President of the United States. There's no greater feeling than winning in your own country, in your own city, and be the first Negro to have done it. So when I won, you have to excuse me, I got a little emotional then. When I won, I think I made, you had to make a, little remark, and I said, I hope that I will wear this crown with dignity and humility. And believe you me, I think I've done so.
Dignity was not exactly the hallmark of a new network television show called American Bandstand, but it too was a champion. The host, then as now, was Dick Clark.
The Bandstand is an extraordinary thing. It started out being highly criticized and maligned and became part of Americana. It arrived on America's doorstep like a stray puppy and became part of the family. That's really what happened to it.
What's going on here? A whole lot of shaking. American Bandstand brought white rockers into our living rooms, of course. The Everly Brothers, Jerry Lee Lewis, Buddy Holly, Bobby Darin, and right alongside them, Fats Domino, Sam Cooke, and Chuck Berry.
Cause they'll be rocking on Bandstand, Philadelphia, PA, deep in the heart of Texas, and around the Frisco Bay.
Black and white together, and they loved it. Frank Brancaccio was a dancer on American Bandstand.
The fact that that happened on the show, the fact that black performers would be there and the white people would be so acceptable and everything was part of the phenomena of the show.
Rock and roll performer Little Richard.
I always felt that American Bandstand would be a great success because it opened the door, the big door, to a lot of entertainers that the black entertainers didn't have no way of getting in. But this was almost like the Red Sea was opening up.
Millions of American teenagers watched the show and saw themselves. Adults may have thought the bandstand dancers were gum-chewing bubbleheads, but to kids, the dancers were family. Justine Corelli was a favorite.
It was probably the biggest soap opera going at that point in time because people got attached to other people. It's almost like a fantasy.
I got a big kick out of it. I liked the fact that I'd walk the streets and people would know my name. And especially if we left the city, people would crowd around you and ask you for autographs.
American Bandstand became an American success story, and if it shook up parents and rattled television executives, well, it got Madison Avenue rolling. Ann Tolstoy-Wallach worked in advertising.
Bandstand was important right away for anyone who had antenna out, like agency executives and network people, because it was the first time that teens had been catered to in this way. You know, people want to see images of themselves on television. It's what they're always asking for. And for years, teens didn't see real images of themselves. They saw rather phony ones. And all of a sudden, here was their music, their dancing, and in their time slot. And it couldn't have lost.
But none of this would have mattered if all those teens hadn't had money to spend, which in post-war America, they did. Now, how to get them to part with their money? American Bandstand showed the way. To get a teenager to buy something, get a teenager to sell it.
And when I market, I make sure this house has Coca-Cola.
But make sure you get the right kind of teenager to sell your product. You want the one who looks like this, not the ones who look like this. Juvenile delinquents. In New York City, in 1 year, the number of teenagers in jail rose 17%. In California, 30%. An American social disease. But it took a Broadway musical to point out that the cure was as obvious as the cause. West Side Story made us look at ourselves. Jerome Robbins, Leonard Bernstein, and Stephen Sondheim made us look at West Side Story.
Boy, crazy boy, get cool, boy.
It was a musical with a message instead of a happy ending. An artistic attempt to shake some sense into society. Larry Kert and Carol Lawrence played the lead roles.
The crisis across the nation, in any inner city, was that the gangs were literally killing each other. There was turmoil, there was violence, there was disaster. And we attacked that in theater, which is the best way. You hold up a mirror to society and you say, what are you going to do about it, Buster? This is what's happening. And we really hit a core because that was where we were hurting.
Hate, violence, death, the separate society of street gangs. Reality, but on Broadway, a little reality went a long way.
We had an actual gang come backstage.
Yes. They came and literally challenged the dancers to a rumble.
Some of them had never been to Manhattan before.
Right.
With nail files and with their girls in their snakeskin jackets and their white. And here we are literally confronting a gang that their lives are spent with gang warfare.
West Side Story was an old story, Romeo and Juliet. That was its point. But would the audience get its point?
Opening night, we did our show. And out front were many, many stars and all the critics. And we came to the death scene, and they were taking Tony's body off. And the bell is tolling the death knell, and the curtain comes down. We rushed to our places to take a bow, and I'm holding onto Larry's hand and Cheetah's hand. And the curtain went up, and the audience just stared at us. And just...
It seemed 20 seconds, you know. I'm sure it was...
overwhelming.
1, 2, boom. But...
And I thought, everybody thought they hate it. And then as if it were choreographed, the entire audience stood up, screaming, applauding, crying, bravo! And we all started to cry. It was just...
It was incredible.
It was, everybody's dream.
September 26, 1957.
What it was a musical tragedy. Real-life tragedy had no score and did not always end on a note of hope. But it was the thought that counted, if people thought. Come back to the fall of 1957 when Sputnik went up, 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 and the Edsel went down, down, down.
Come back to our world, all shook up in the autumn of '57.
The Cat Owner's Guide to Crave Behavior. The stare, the hint, means give your cat Crave, and then you'll see the victory. Because Crave has the taste cats prefer.
Oh, my kitty cat craves Crave.
Got great curves? Great curves deserve 18-hour. Playtex 18-hour bra. Supports full figures more beautifully, comfortably. Great curves deserve the 18-hour bra. From Playtex, the fit that makes the fashion.
My roommate said, "Gee, Shelley, your skin looks really good. It couldn't be because of Dove." I said, "Jen, it must be."
We asked women to give up their soap and use Dove for 7 days.
I had some dry spots right here. After using Dove for 7 days, they're gone.
Dove contains 1/4 moisturizing cream. Its non-soap formula won't dry your face like soap.
Everybody wants to look touchable. With Dove, my skin feels wonderful.
It's the Subaru Value Celebration, the greatest Subaru deals in Subaru history. That's one Subaru commercial you won't see the rest of. What's really important isn't hoopla, but a great deal on a great car, like up to $1,500 cash back on a Subaru. With the money you can save now at your Subaru dealer, you can have your own celebration.
Up to $1,500 factory cash back on a Subaru. Or now you can get Subaru's 3.9% financing. That's really cause for celebration.
Eating on the run's got you tied in knots. Send the bubbles of Alka-Seltzer to the rescue, because speed is what you need to loosen the grip of your acid indigestion and heartburn with a headache fast. So when your stomach and head have gotten you tied up, help undo it with the bubbles of Alka-Seltzer.
Alka-Seltzer to the rescue.
Try new extra strength Alka-Seltzer. More of what you take Alka-Seltzer for.
In a moment, our world continues with Americans all shook up in the autumn of '57.
On the freshest produce.
At Fred Meyer's, your best choice for low prices.
On the biggest selection.
At Fred Meyer's.
This week, get a super low price on Imperial margarine. Your first 1-pound box is only 10 cents. And your first 3-pound can of Crisco, regular or butter flavor shortening is just $1.99 now through Tuesday.
Your best choice for low prices.
And one-stop shopping.
Fred Meyer stores.
For your #1 deal on the #1 selling trucks in the U.S., see Kendall Ford now. Over 200 units must be sold during the summer sell-down sale. Choose from Ranger pickups in both 2- and 4-wheel drive, Broncos and Bronco 2s, the top-selling full-size F-Series in both 2- and 4-wheel drive. Choose from super cabs, crew cabs, and more. Get your #1 truck buy now with top savings during the summer sell-down sale at Kendall Ford, Valley River, and Springfield.
KEZI-TV, Eugene.
Welcome back to the autumn of 1957. If we were all shook up, it's because we'd begun to realize that the relative peace and prosperity we'd enjoyed since World War II combined with a national belief in happy endings, still had not turned America into Sunnybrook Farm. Governors would not do as they were told. The young would not mind their elders. After all, they were beginning to outnumber them. Even music seemed to have gone haywire. And if America was the greatest place on earth, then why wasn't everybody happy? Luckily for us, there still were a few things you could count on, take pride in.
We had prided ourselves on our scientific and technological know-how. Maybe we never had a Mozart or a Picasso, but by golly, we had Edison and Henry Ford. Now that complacency was shaken when the Soviets launched Sputnik. It was about twice the size of this model and weighed 184 pounds. Its political and psychological weight was incalculable. As for the heirs of Henry Ford, well, they had a bad year.
Our obsession with progress seemed unshakable. Take cars. Nobody questioned why next year's models had to come out in September or why their debut was such a big deal. New cars were progress. The past was used Kleenex. Detroit was not in the Kleenex business.
Starting with a radical new concept, the Aeroframe chassis, Pontiac now brings you new stability never known in a car before.
Here's the busiest car in the world, our 58 Oldsmobile Fiesta.
If new cars were progress, so were suburbs. Both were growing, and each depended on the other. Ford meant to keep those customers satisfied, so it researched and developed for 3 years, then in September, presented us with the automobile's first test tube baby.
It is the car we designed around you.
It was the classic calculated risk, a product of market research in every way, except for its name. Gail Warnock, in charge of public relations, remembers what happened.
Mr. Breach, who was the chairman of the board, called a meeting of his executive committee to name the car.
The last of many such meetings. In all, there would be 6,000 suggestions. Ford even went to the poet Marion Moore, probably the only spontaneous action connected with this car. She thought Utopian Turtle Top might do.
So finally, Breach says, I don't like any of them. Why don't we call it Edsel?
Up to now, we at Ford have called it simply the E-Car. Today, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to announce its official name, Edsel, in honor of my father, who served as president of Ford Motor Company.
Now, Edsel was the first name to drop out of every survey. Nobody liked it. You ask them to associate it with something, and they'd say Schmetzel, Diesel, Pretzel.
How does it feel to own an Edsel?
It's like falling in love.
Raymond Perry was among those who fell in love too easily that fall.
The lines of the car and the fact that it had so much advanced electronic equipment that it really struck me as something that I had to have. It had a lot of the modern advances with electronics. In fact, on the steering wheel, they had a push-button operation that shifted the gears. And I liked the taillights on the car especially well. They were like two eyebrows. These were real graceful.
To an Edsel dealer, Perry was Mr. Right.
If they could sell an Edsel to a Cadillac owner, that would be quite a feather in their cap. The Edsel Citation convertible was an even trade for the Cadillac that I owned.
Promises, promises. It was promises that lured 2.5 million people into the tent the first weekend. One of the biggest ad campaigns ever for a car.
This is the Edsel.
Or an Oldsmobile sucking a lemon. Finally, the Edsel proved Thurber was correct when he wrote that progress was all right, but it went on too long.
The fruit of American automotive technology that fall was a lemon. How embarrassing. There was worse embarrassment to come. In the fall of '57, the International Geophysical Year was just hitting its stride. That was a massive, cooperative, scientific effort involving 67 countries. We all learned a lot about the weather and cosmic rays and sunspots and all that. We also learned that on October 4th, the Soviet Union had launched a little round metal ball, less than 2 feet in diameter, into orbit around the Earth. This is a simulation, courtesy of the Hayden Planetarium in New York City. While the Soviets were conquering space, this country was making Edsels, incongruous, embarrassing, but it woke us up.
This first satellite was today successfully launched in the USSR.
Sputnik orbited the Earth every 96 minutes at a speed of 18,000 miles an hour, beeping radio signals to Earth. News of Sputnik's launching reached New York Times science reporter Walter Sullivan at a Soviet embassy party for the International Geophysical Year. He got a call from his office.
I went down into the lobby and picked up the phone, and they said very excitedly, "We've just gotten a bulletin from Moscow, and the Russians have launched the first Earth satellite." So I went back up into the embassy ballroom. Now, mind you, this is the Soviet embassy on 16th Street then, a grand old mansion with a fabulously grand ballroom, chandeliers and all that sort of thing, and all these people standing around drinking vodka, eating caviar, celebrating this conference. And I realized that nobody in that room could know, not even the Russians, that they had launched this satellite. They knew they were going to try, but they couldn't know that they had succeeded. So I thought, let's announce it to the Russians in their own embassy.
White House Staff Secretary General Andrew Goodpaster brought the tidings to his commander-in-chief.
I took it in to the president, who was rather unconcerned, and his comment and the comments of others in the White House that first day were rather more than low-key. They just indicated that this was not a matter of tremendous significance.
John Eisenhower thought his father goofed.
Now, Dad's mistake was, or his error, I think you'd agree with me, was not in knowing what the Soviets could do, but in the public reaction. He very vastly underestimated the panic that hit the country as a result of the Soviets putting up the satellite.
Russia had won the opening round in rocket supremacy.
Panic may be an overstatement, but certainly this country was concerned, even shaken. Ham radio operators became local celebrities. Arthur Bonte was a New York ham.
I have logged it 4 distinct times. The first time being yesterday evening about 6:35 p.m. It started to come in.
My son had put a sign up outside the house asking for a penny to listen to the Sputnik, and of course all the kids in the neighborhood wanted to hear the Sputnik.
Around the world I've searched for you.
At Britain's Jodrell Bank Observatory, Sir Bernard Lovell monitored Sputnik and marveled.
I thought this must be one of the most wonderful places on Earth, but it wasn't. The most wonderful place on Earth at that moment was in the Soviet Union, where Sputnik was being launched.
Rock and roll star Little Richard, who was in Australia, had an expensive, visceral reaction to Sputnik.
And I said, boy, this is something new. Russia done sent Sputnik up. I better get out of here. Because I really believe that something serious was getting ready to happen to the world. I said, after these dates, I'm going to stop singing. I'm going with the Lord. And so I got on the ferry and I threw all of my jewelry in the water. I don't know what the fish is right now, but he's full of diamonds. He's a shining fish.
Sir Anthony Nutting, a former high-ranking official in the British Foreign Ministry, was working temporarily as a journalist.
I remember one newspaper ran the devastating statement in its editorial, while we have been conquering Little Rock, the Russians have been conquering space.
Soviet supremacy in space generated fear as well as embarrassment.
It showed us that the Soviets could use a missile to land a weapon on the United States from Soviet territory, just that. And at that time, it would not have been possible for the United States to have replied.
Arkady Shevchenko was a Soviet diplomat.
First Sputnik was an indication that the Soviet Union become an equal partner and adversary of the United States in the world, everywhere.
The Soviet Union and the United States had planned to orbit an Earth satellite as part of the International Geophysical Year. But in this country, civilians in charge of the satellite part collided with the military in charge of the rocketry part. In that bureaucratic bog, Sputnik buried an American illusion.
we always believed that Americans were tops in things. So we had that feeling. We were instilled as kids that, hey, you're an American, you could do it better, you know. Of course, it was a little bit of a shock to find out somebody else could do it, too.
Senator Styles Bridges of New Hampshire made that reaction official. For the Congressional Record, he wrote, "The time has clearly come to be less concerned with the depth of the pile on the new broadloom rug or the height of the tail fin on the new car, and to be more prepared to shed blood, sweat, and tears."
Come back to the autumn of 1957. Bring your library card. For a clue to the times, look in the card catalog under the letter B, as in businessmen, beats, and the bomb. Books are the original time machines.
It started over 2 decades ago. The finest varietal grapes were planted. The world's most costly vineyards. The harvest begins in the Napa-Sonoma growing regions. The greatest winemaking facilities in the world. Cork from Portugal. Oak Cellars. Gallo's first vintage-dated wines. Acclaim. In just 20 short years, the maker of America's most popular wine has become America's most honored winery. Today's Gallo. All the best a wine can be.
It's your call. You can enjoy the fresh-baked quality from Domino's Pizza or take your chances with the Noid. You can have pizza made to your order, or you can count on our famous 30-minute delivery, or you can taste the quality from Domino's Pizza, so avoid the Noid. Domino's Pizza delivers. Call now.
I'm Charles Gibson. Good morning, America.
Bob, you're going to miss your plane.
Saying there's more color in men's fashions today, and I suppose that has to do with the new trend.
Northeast to be wet today with rain continuing into late
You look
tonight.
nice.
Well, there's more color in men's fashions today.
Good morning, America. Family to family.
I recall that after Sputnik, those of us who were in secondary school were encouraged to put Shakespeare on the back burner and start paying attention in math class. America needed rocket scientists, and rocket scientists didn't need Shakespeare, or so they said. Being mathematically impaired from birth, I was excused from the space race and permitted to continue wasting my time reading books that didn't have answers in the back. I had company. 3 of the best-selling books in the fall of 1957 said something about the way we were that fact often does not. What follows are 3 readings from 3 of those books, courtesy of 3 distinguished actors. What follows is not about answers. It's about questions.
The first book was a nonfiction bestseller that fall. William H. White took a critical but not unfriendly look at a new breed that was now numerically dominant in this country, the white-collar worker. In the fall of '57, there were 1.5 million more people selling the sizzle than there were making the steak. The new man lived in the suburbs, surrounded by the appliances of the good life, earned about $6,000 a year in a middle management job, and he wanted to stay put. Author White gave him a book and gave him a name. Actor Tony Roberts gives us a sample.
This book is about the organization man. If the term is vague, it is because I can think of no other way to describe the people I'm talking about. They talk of the treadmill, the rat race, of the inability to control one's direction, but they have no sense of plight. Frequently, they talk of finding a sort of plateau, a position well enough up to be interesting, but not so far up as to have one's neck outstretched for others to chop at. As far as social values are concerned, suburbia is the ultimate expression of the interchangeability so sought by organization. It is classless, or at least its people want it to be. The organization man has found in the new suburbs an ideal way station. He is the one most quick to move out, but as soon as he does, another replaces him. and then another. It is he who sets the tone. And if he is as uncertain as any in keeping up with the Joneses, it is because he is the Joneses. One of the hazards of the kind of life we lead, says a man now poised on the threshold of top management, is the loss of well-defined objectives. What is the purpose? What is the end? I was deeply a part of the community. I was contributing and was effective. Then they asked me to come to New York. The VP in charge told me that by coming here, I'd have a box seat in the big time. If his guess has been bad, it's a terrible waste. I hope the company isn't playing checkers with me. I feel a lack.
While all those organization men settled into harness, a much smaller group kicked over the traces. They were the Beats. They renounced everything the organization man stood for. They embraced poetry and jazz. They made a religion of nonconformity. Their high priest was Jack Kerouac, and their Bible was his new book that fall, On the Road.
I had traveled 8,000 miles around the American continent, and I was back on Times Square, and right in the middle of a rush hour, too. Seeing with my innocent road eyes the absolute madness and fantastic career of New York with its millions and millions hustling forever for a buck among themselves. The mad dream, grabbing, taking, giving, sighing, dying, just so they could be buried in those awful cemetery cities beyond Long Island City. The high towers of the land, the other end of the land, the place where paper America is born. The only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles exploding like spiders across the stars, and in the middle you see the blue center light pop, and everybody goes, oh.
And pop goes the A-bomb. If the launch of Sputnik shocked us all in the fall of '57, continued atomic testing scared us. That fear of nuclear war was reflected that fall in a third book, a best-selling novel. In it, radiation clouds approach the last innocent victims of Armageddon. On the Beach by Neville Shute.
I won't take it, she said vehemently. It's not fair. No one in the southern hemisphere ever dropped a bomb, a hydrogen bomb or a cobalt bomb or any other sort of bomb. We had nothing to do with it. Why should we have to die because other countries 9 or 10,000 miles away from us wanted to have a war? So bloody unfair. It's that all right, he said. And that's the way it is. There was a pause. And then she said angrily, it's not that I'm afraid of dying, Dwight. We've all got to do that sometime. It's all the things I'm going to have to miss. She turned to him in the starlight. I'm never going to get outside Australia. All my life I've wanted to see the Rue de Rivoli. I suppose it's the romantic name. It's silly because I suppose it's just a street like any other street. But that's what I've wanted. And I'm never going to see it. Because there isn't any Paris now, or London, or New York. He smiled at her gently. The Rue de Rivoli may still be there with things in the shop windows and everything. I wouldn't know if Paris got a bomb or not. Maybe it's all there still, just as it was. The sun shining down the street the way you'd want to see it. That's the way I like to think about that sort of place. It's just that folks don't live there anymore. She got restlessly to her feet. That's not the way I wanted to see it. A city of dead people.
Whether by fool's luck or wise design, we have avoided the apocalypse. Maybe On the Beach had a little something to do with that. Come back to the autumn of 1957 and some legacies of that season.
Some vacations are perfectly safe, but not this one. It could happen to you. So don't carry cash, carry American Express traveler's checks. Don't leave home without them.
It's very important to our family that Charlie gets what he likes because we think he's pretty special. He likes Calcan, and he's proven that again and again. Never missed a lick of his Calcan. He chose Calcan all by himself.
See if your cat prefers Calcan.
Now, Sunlight for dishwashers comes in a liquid.
You make me sparkle, glisten, glimmer, and shine. You make me look like I'm something divine. You make me oh so clean, yeah, you leave me spotless.
New liquid Sunlight dissolves quickly and rinses completely, so it gets all your glasses this spotless, even in sunlight.
Yeah, you leave me spotless.
New Sunlight. No liquid gets glasses more spotless.
Thousands of minority kids desperately need parents to adopt them. But should those parents be white?
I've always really had an identity crisis.
Watch 2020 next.
To shake some sense into, I wonder, is the phrase an Americanism? I'm going to shake some sense into your head. But just how much shaking does it take to produce sense? And what do you get if you shake too hard? Our premise tonight was that America, in the fall of 1957, was all shook up. That being the case, did it shake some sense into us, or what?
By November, the 101st Airborne was withdrawn, but the State National Guard was federalized and remained until spring. And in September of '58, Governor Faubus tried another ploy.
I have ordered closed the senior high schools of Little Rock.
The schools were closed for a year, reopened in 1959. Central High was integrated. Faubus flourished. He was re-elected 5 more times. His intransigence gave heart to segregationists throughout the South. Federal force was called upon repeatedly to protect the civil rights and the safety of blacks. Central High School has been integrated, peaceful, and proud for years now. 58% black, 60% of its graduates going on to college. Faubus is a footnote.
In September of 1957, nobody could have imagined that in December of 1986, American Bandstand would still be on the air, and with Madison Avenue close on its heels.
I got my 501 blue.
The spare change of the 5017 multiplied and multiplied until in 1986, teenagers spent nearly $30 billion. Spent, not earned.
You never saw a car like the 58 Edsel.
The Edsel cost the Ford Motor Company about $400 million. It survived for 2 years, then died unmourned and unloved. Only its name lives on. The funny-sounding name for a funny-looking car, still a synonym for failure. Cars, like politicians, can endure almost anything but ridicule.
Sputnik went up in October. Then a second Soviet satellite, this one carrying a dog, went up in November, and the red flag went up in America. This is what the president said.
One of our greatest and most glaring deficiencies is the failure of us in this country to give high priority enough to scientific education and to the place of science in our national life.
In December, we launched our first satellite. It blew up on the pad. But by 1958, we'd learned. Explorer 1 was the beginning. Now the sky is filled with weather, telephone, television, and spy satellites, with more to come. In fact, there are so many satellites up there that it's almost impossible to photograph the night sky and get a picture that does not include at least one satellite trail. Sputnik changed American education, too. Congress increased federal aid to science and education, and, well, one thing led to another.
Right here?
Well, there it is, the way it was for a couple of months in the autumn of 1957. The institution most shaken by the events of that season was the Little Red Schoolhouse, the educational establishment. After Sputnik, the cry of back to basics was heard in the land. More physics, more math, more facts. Well, they were certainly more important than basket weaving and driver's ed. But were they more important than the arts, the humanities, the social sciences? That debate continues to this day. In the South, black students simply wanted the best education they were entitled to, whether it was calculus or glee club. And in Little Rock, 9 brave children shook the tree until the fruit fell.
The 23rd edition of Webster's Dictionary calls Edsel a popular synonym for loser. The dictionary, like most of us, has missed the point. The Edsel wasn't a loser, it was a prototype. The first car designed and built by advertising, bookkeeping, and market research. Not to run well, but to sell well. It did neither. Sadly, it also didn't discourage the market researchers and bookkeepers. To them, the Edsel was a practice run, and with enough practice, they seemed damn near to have perfected the trick of making profit the real product. In 1986, a great number of American companies are no longer in business to produce cars or TV sets or soap or movies or soft drinks. They produce profit, which accounts for some of the cars, TV sets, soap, movies, and soft drinks. These days, if it sells, it's good, not the other way around. And if you still believe Edsel is a synonym for loser, check the 1986 price of a 1957 Edsel. Then ask for a refund on your Webster's Dictionary. And so it goes.
These things also happened in the fall of 1957.
The Milwaukee Braves won the World Series, beating the Yankees in 7 games.
Francis Cardinal Spellman was appointed as the first military vicar of the United States.
In Nevada, the Atomic Energy Commission detonated the first recorded underground nuclear explosion.
In Haiti, Papa Doc, Francois Duvalier, was re-elected president.
Dag Hammarskjöld was unanimously re-elected as Secretary General of the United Nations General Assembly.
James Hoffa, under indictment for perjury, was elected president of the Teamsters Union.
Sophia Loren and Carlo Ponti were married by proxy. Bing Crosby and Catherine Grant were married in person.
Louis B. Mayer, Christian Dior, and Harry Teets, the warden of San Quentin Prison, died.
On September 18th, Robin Horlick, Our World production assistant, was born.
Associate producer Jody Abramson was born on September 12th.
For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
You can make a difference. Help someone learn how to read.
It's a dream come true for Steve and Tricia. The moment they've been waiting for.
Today's my wedding day. Nothing in the world can stop us.
You going to a wedding packing guns?
Will their happiness be destroyed by revenge? On Loving, weekdays.
Your Northwest Ford dealers have a special announcement. Here's an update.
The big story is special 1.9% financing, the lowest ever from Ford. Take your pick of the cars that were named Motor Trend Car of the Year 2 years running. The Ford Thunderbird and the Ford Taurus. 1.9 or up to $700 cash back. Interest rates this low won't be around long, so you'd better hurry. Shop early while selection is best.
That's one more reason why Ford is #1 in the Northwest.
The 87 Lane County Fair's extra special. Free entertainment at 6 and 9 p.m. sponsored by local businesses, plus dances, concerts, exhibits, rides, and more. Friday is U.S. Bank Day at the 87 Lane County Fair. Pick up your Lane County Fair coupon at any Lane County U.S. Bank location for half-price gate admission. Half-price coupon good for entry between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. And sign up to win valuable prizes at the U.S. Bank booth.
See you at the fair, the Lane County Fair.
The 87 Lane County Fair, August 18th through the 23rd.
Come and see Eyewitness News live on location at the Lane County Fair, Tuesday through Friday, August 18th to 21st at 11:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m.
KEZI, Eugene.
When we remember a time, we remember moments. A kaleidoscope of the sights, the sounds, the emotions that remind us of the way we were. Our world. It's about time. Here are Linda Ellerby and Ray Gandolf.
For the next hour, think of your television set as a time machine.
Here we are again with our toys in the attic and our old newsstand and the songs and movies and the memories, all the paraphernalia for time traveling.
Welcome to Our World. The time is October 1962. Call it the season of the new frontier. We send Americans into space. We send Americans abroad, armed with apple pie technology and an all-American smile. President John Kennedy is 45 years old, and in the media, poverty and racism seem less a concern than the color of Jacqueline Kennedy's next pillbox hat. The only war we're fighting is a cold one with our old ally turned enemy, the Soviet Union. And we have a national belief in happy endings. That is about to change.
October of '62 brought a missile crisis in Cuba. 13 days that shook the world and almost broke it. If you remember it at all, you remember it well. It was a frightening time. That 2-week period is our chief port of call tonight, but through much of it, most of us didn't know about it. In early October, not even our young president knew about it for sure, and it seemed that, like him, we were all young and light of heart.
Young is what sells. It is the young who do the twist. Ride in convertibles. It is the young who own the space age. By mid-October, America seems to be winning the space race. A 39-year-old Navy pilot becomes the third American to orbit our world. And now, Wally Schirra is back from space, our newest hero of the moment.
Then you saw science coming out of the woodwork. Scientists were no longer considered Van Dyke beards with white smocks. These were regular guys who were exploring things and wanted to know more about man, wanted to know more about medicine.
Another young man, the president's press secretary, Pierre Salinger.
And of course, by 1962, we were getting the first fallback on, we were seeing the results of this space adventure. There was a feeling in the American people as if they were stockholders in this space corporation that we had created, that we were all part of it.
Only a handful of us would go into space, so we brought space down to Earth.
Round and round, up and down.
In October of 1962, the newest space-age airport, Dulles, was in the final stages of construction near Washington, D.C. Your reservations would be poured into computers, and tickets would come out. You could fly coast to coast on a sleek new 707. In Seattle, where the 1962 World's Fair was in its final week, the big attraction was the Space Needle, and you could glimpse the future as corporate America envisioned it.
This is the Bell System's new touch-tone dialing. With this indicator, you see how many seconds you saved the new way. Let's try it. Okay, I'll race you. As we look to the future, we see many extras for tomorrow's telephone users. One day, from a public telephone a couple of 100 miles away, turn on your home air conditioner and have the house nice and cool when you return from your hot trip.
Meet George Jetson.
The space age infiltrated comedy and gave us a cartoon sitcom.
His boy Elroy.
And an American playing a Mexican playing an astronaut.
Now, your name is?
My name, Asahiman.
As I understand it, you are the chief astronaut of the United States Interplanetary Expeditionary Force.
I am the chief astronaut of the United States in the plan. My name, Asahiman.
And space breathed new life into 3 old knockabout comics.
As I was saying, keep your cotton-picking fingers off the orbit button. What, do you think I am dumb? I don't think I know. Well, I don't think you know either.
No, good night, my someone, good night.
And yet one of the most popular movies in October 1962 was as earthbound as could be. We checked our preoccupation with space long enough to celebrate the old, rustic, and perhaps mythical virtues of small-town America.
Folks, listen. May I have your attention, please? Attention, please. I can deal with the troubled friends with a wave of my hand, this very hand. Please observe me if you will. I'm Professor Harold Hill, and I'm here to organize a River City Boys band.
A new TV show debuted in the fall of 1962. A family of suddenly rich hillbillies encountered the new technology and was baffled.
This here sideways pump don't work at all. We must have carried in a barrel of water to prime that thing, but it don't work.
We laughed and made it the top-rated show in the country. Technology even helped us escape technology. The threat of nuclear war was a problem, we were told, that could be solved by concrete, canned goods, and a hole in the ground.
All you need is shelter, a shielding between you and the radioactive fallout.
One of those who told us that was Defense Secretary Robert McNamara.
Not only did anyone believe it, I'd say essentially everybody believed it. And certainly I believed it, the president believed it, I testified in favor of it. I was totally wrong.
Believing comes so easy to us. Don't we have a young president leading us with great vigor into the new frontier? On October 10th, a Gallup poll gives him a startling 62% approval rating. Our love affair with the Kennedys is in full bloom.
There's such a lot of world to see. We're after the same rainbows and waiting round the bend, my huckleberry friend.
But meanwhile, there is no love affair where the 1962 congressional campaign is concerned. Republicans insist Cuba is becoming a Soviet military stronghold and that it's dangerous for Kennedy to continue to ignore it. Max Frankel is covering foreign policy for the New York Times.
There was a big clamor in the Senate led by New York Senator Keating that offensive missiles, possibly even nuclear missiles, were being moved in there, and Kennedy was being forced to deny it and to prove that we were keeping track, and that set the stage for what later happened.
Kennedy is caught by politics. Cuba has become a campaign issue, which is one reason why those things that will soon happen will first happen in secret. A drama of war played to a private audience. Come back to Sunday, October 14th, 1962, for The Secret Crisis.
Our World continues in a moment.
Youth. A time to race with the wind. To run free. That's only a dream for some kids. But you can help them fight to make that dream come true. Every time you buy Budweiser and Bud Light this August, you help us make a contribution to the Muscular Dystrophy Association. So look for this display where you buy Bud and Bud Light. And remember, you really make it work.
At Duracell, the race to be the best, to be the king of the road, goes on and on. Which is why today's copper top battery lasts up to 30% longer than the ones we made just 2 years ago. 30% longer. Today's copper top from Duracell. No battery lasts longer.
Mr. Hill, I need to talk to you. Last week, I switched to this wide deodorant, and now I'm getting no protection against wetness.
You need new extra-wide Arid protection.
That's wide.
New Arid Extra Wide Solid contains a powerful anti-wetness ingredient these ordinary wide deodorant sticks don't, to fight odor and the wetness they can't.
I'll take extra wide protection. That's Arid protection.
New Extra Wide Arid Solid fights odor and the wetness ordinary wide deodorant sticks can't. Baby Fresh Scent, too.
If you think all tartar control toothpastes were created equal, we've got news for you. One of these formulas, Colgate Tartar Control with Fluoride, has been clinically proven more effective. Proven better than Tartar Control Crest of fighting ugly tartar buildup. Over 1.5 times better in a 3-month study, and 4.5 times better in a 6-month study. So once you weigh the evidence, you'll know. It's Colgate Tartar Control.
It looks great.
Welcome back to our world. If your newsstand sold soda pop in October of 1962, you could buy a Diet Right Cola, the first sugar-free soft drink marketed nationwide. You'd have to go someplace else, though, like a saloon, maybe a package store, to find the first ever pop-top can that was on Iron City Beer. Pope John the 23rd convenes Vatican II that month, a council that will perform lasting surgery on the Catholic Church. And the Saturday Evening Post is running a serial version of Failsafe, a new novel about a computer error that launches a nuclear strike on Moscow. The fictional American president is in anguish.
The real American president is not yet. At the moment, Kennedy faces only the normal troubles of being president. Kennedy likes to quote this poem to people. Bullfight critics, row on row, crowd the enormous Plaza de Toros. But only one is there who knows, and he is the one who fights the bull. It is Saturday night. Kennedy is about to meet his bull. Only this bull is a bear, a Russian bear.
Never on Sunday does not apply to spies, politicians, and presidents.
As long as you live, Poland lives. Jeśli Polska nie istnieje. That is still true.
On Sunday, October 14th, President Kennedy appears in the Pulaski Day Parade in Buffalo, New York. And in the sky over Cuba, Kennedy has ordered U-2 spy planes to take photographs. The mission is routine. The pictures are not. October 16th, the president summons speechwriter Ted Sorensen.
He told me that Soviet nuclear missiles had been identified on the island of Cuba, 90 miles from our shore, and that a special meeting was being called later that morning of those whom he wanted to consult on the U.S. response.
Kennedy is shocked and angry. But while he and his advisors grope for the appropriate response, it's decided that he will say nothing publicly, that he will adhere to his previously planned schedule as strictly as he can. The man in charge of that is Special Assistant Dave Powers.
The first appointment was the astronaut, Walter Schirra, with his family. And the president, he was so happy. He loved meeting astronauts.
There's a family gathering at the White House as the president receives astronaut Walter M. Schirra, Jr. and his family.
I come into the Oval Room and I see this great man. We'd met him before with Glenn and Shepard. We sat down. I remember my daughter holding up her little grubby fingers. She was 5 years old. The president had asked her, and he's sitting in his rocking chair, smiling very graciously, just having a good time with us. So it really amazed me when I found out what kind of crisis was really going on all up and down those halls.
At 11:45 that morning, all the president's men, the best and the brightest, gather here in the cabinet room around John Kennedy. They are ExComm, the Executive Committee of the National Security Council. An extraordinary period of crisis management begins in secret. Assistant Secretary of Defense Roswell Gilpatrick.
And I think the sense one got at that first meeting was that, the United States had to move in. We had to do something about it.
At this first meeting, Bobby Kennedy passes his brother a note. I now know how Tojo felt when he was planning Pearl Harbor. The group will continue to meet, its existence and concerns still secret.
It's the day at Candlestick. 6 months of baseball now spirals to a climax in just one game.
The only missile of concern that day to the American people was a horsehide rocket launched by Willie McCovey and intercepted by Bobby Richardson in the bottom of the ninth. And instead of the Giants beating the Yankees in the 7th game of the World Series, it was the other way round. At that moment, I was appearing in a play here in Paramus, New Jersey, at a theater run by Robert Ludlum. He went on to write thriller novels with somewhat greater success. The theater's closed now. It was back there in that mall somewhere. I don't remember the play, but I do remember listening to that World Series game backstage and grieving for Willie McCovey. Cuba was a long way away.
Congressional elections are only 3 weeks away. Wednesday, October 17th. Kennedy goes to Connecticut to campaign for Democratic candidates. And in California, an ex-president is campaigning for an ex-vice president, Richard Nixon, who's running for governor.
I'm for Nixon.
I'm for Nixon.
I'm for Nixon, too.
California needs him. Dick Nixon is for you.
Meanwhile, in Washington, the ExComm is meeting. The latest reconnaissance photos show that the missiles could be operational within a week. With the president gone, the discussion is heated, and the advisors divide into two camps.
Bobby Kennedy, McNamara, and I were the only ones who wanted to keep the military response at its lowest level. Everybody else wanted an airstrike or Joint Chiefs of Staff ultimately wanted just to go in and, clean out the Castro regime.
Dean Acheson, the former Secretary of State, was called in as an outside consultant. He recommended an airstrike against the missiles in Cuba. Someone said to him, Mr. Secretary, what will the Soviets do in response? Oh, I know the Soviets pretty well, he said, from dealing with them over the years. I think they will then feel obligated to launch an attack and knock out our missiles in Turkey. And what will we then do, Mr. Secretary? Well, he said, under the NATO treaty, we would then be obligated to knock out Soviet missile sites inside the Soviet Union. Well, what will they then do, Mr. Secretary? Well, he said that we hope by that time cooler heads will prevail and everybody will talk. Fortunately, we did not take his advice.
And during these long days, when the president and his men are trying to decide whether or not we go to war, the cover must be kept. So Bobby Kennedy takes time from the crisis to attend the premiere of the big movie that fall, The Longest Day. It is an epic about war.
Das wird für die Alliierten, aber auch für die Deutschen der längste Tag werden. Der längste Tag.
Thursday, October 18th. The ExComm looks at reports showing that the missiles in Cuba could carry half the Soviet Union's warheads and carry them right to us. Kennedy keeps a previously scheduled appointment to meet Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko.
The president asked a direct question to Gromyko, said, is it true that you're installing missiles in Cuba? Gromyko said, absolutely not. Just flatly lied to the president. And which was interesting because also it did not reveal to Gromyko that we knew that the missiles existed.
As fortune would have it, the same day technology is threatening to blow us from the face of the Earth, technology is pushing the space race forward. The Ranger 5 moon probe is launched from Cape Canaveral. And the beginnings of life are honored when an American and a British scientist, Watson and Crick, take the Nobel Prize for discovering the key to genetics, DNA. And if you're watching ABC on that Thursday night, you see...
Ozzie, Harriet, David, and Ricky.
At 7:30, a happy family of 4. At 8, another happy family of 4. And at 8:30, a very happy family of 4. Life is pretty simple here, but this is television, not reality.
And Jerry Mathers as the Beaver.
Beaver is kind of the innocent, viewing the world, not really understanding it. Wally is the middle character. He's kind of the bridge between the adult world and Beaver's innocent world. And then there's the adults saying, this is what should be done. Sometimes they don't even do what they say, but they still say this is the way it should be done.
What has to be done in the adult world of Washington is to keep the Cuban crisis secret.
There were all kinds of cover stories to explain everything, even by somebody as high as McGeorge Bundy, who was the National Security Advisor, urging us to believe that it was yet another Berlin crisis. Yes, we are having trouble. There's something in Berlin. We don't want to talk about it. We think we can get through it, but it's tough. About 12 o'clock, I called up the German ambassador, a fellow named Greve, and it was very clear that I got him out of bed about 11:30. And the lights were burning in the State Department. The lights were burning at the White House. an alleged Berlin crisis, and the German ambassador is calmly asleep. I came back to the office. I said, you know, not Berlin.
Friday, October 19th.
Friday was a tough day. He spoke in Cleveland, tremendous crowds, and he spoke he visited Lincoln's tomb. And then we came into Chicago, and Daley and all the crowd.
That night, Bobby Kennedy calls his brother in Chicago, asking him to return to the White House and the crisis. Saturday, October 20th.
I'm having breakfast with the president. He called Admiral Berkeley, the White House physician, down to his suite. And about 10 minutes later, he called Pierre.
And I arrived in the suite, and the president was sitting there in his bathrobe, and he had this yellow pad in front of him, and he was writing on it. And he hands me the pad, and the pad said 99.2 degrees temperature. Doctor says president must return to Washington for treatment. And he said, I want you to call a press conference and announce that because we're flying back to Washington. The president came out of the hotel with an overcoat and a hat on. I mean, he never wore a hat. And, you know, kind of bundled up. And I think if you saw him from outside, you had the impression that he maybe did have the flu.
The president goes immediately to the White House. Secretary of State Dean Rusk is there.
And when he walked into the room to join the rest of us, he looked around the table and said with a little smile, well, gentlemen, today we're going to earn our pay. He decided, on the recommendation of myself and Bob McNamara, and Bobby Kennedy, and some others, to use the quarantine method to blockade offensive weapons coming into Cuba.
An armada of U.S. naval ships would form a blockade line 500 miles from Cuba. Soviet bloc ships trying to cross the line would be stopped and searched for missile parts. On land that weekend, the military also is on the move. In Key West, Florida, a command post for a possible invasion of Cuba is being set up. Monroe County Commissioner Billy Freeman gets a late-night phone call.
The government wanted permission to build an observation tower at this airport. And I had to call the lumber yard and get them to open up to be able to get the materials out to come out here and build this thing. And I must admit, it was about the fastest piece of construction I've ever seen done. And that was the first inkling that something was going on.
Most of us have no inkling that anything is afoot.
With the title, Mr. President, you wondered, no doubt, just who it could be. Don't jump to conclusions. It's not who
On
you
Broadway, a new Irving Berlin musical opens about a mythical White House, a mythical President, Robert Ryan, and a mythical First Lady, Nanette Fabre.
Not the Kennedys.
One of the songs is not all that mythical.
If you make the wrong decision when the final chips are down, the White House is the loneliest place in town.
Sunday, October 21st. The missile secret is now a week old.
Don't take your love away from me.
The Seattle World's Fair ends a successful run. President Kennedy, pleading that phony cold, does not attend closing ceremonies. Ranger 5, the unmanned moon probe, misses its target by more than 300 miles. And the troop movements are increasing now. The media are beginning to sniff out the big story.
And for us, it was vital that the story not break until the American fleet was in position to exercise the blockade that we were setting up around Cuba.
Max Frankel of the Times and his boss, James Reston, call Salinger and tell him they have the story. The president calls back.
And within minutes, President Kennedy was on the phone and said something on the order of, so you know what it is. Reston said, yes, we do. You found offensive missiles in Cuba. Kennedy said, do you know what I'm going to do about it? He said, no, we can't find out. He said, well, I'm going to put on a blockade. Just like that. Gave us the story. He said, now you can't print that. And as a matter of fact, I don't want you to print that we know they got nuclear missiles there. If you tip off the Russians in advance as to what I'm going to do or the fact that this is what we're acting on, they may take measures to try to rush some ships in there or to put the nuclear warheads on the missiles. So it's up to you as to whether we get into a war, and I'm asking you not to print the story.
The Times agrees to sit on the story. But first, the president must assure Frankel and Reston that he's not buying time to mount some kind of secret action against Cuba.
And the president said, I understand and I appreciate it, and you have my word of honor, that there will be no violence and no war until, I hope, ever, but certainly not before I go on the air tomorrow night and tell the country what this is all about. And I'd be grateful for your cooperation. And Reston said, okay, you have it.
Come back to Monday, October 22nd, and the end of blissful ignorance. President Kennedy tells the American people what's going on in Cuba, and the fear begins.
It's man against machine at the Silver Bullet.
Lou, what is this thing? Oh, it's our new punching machine. Watch it. Put your money in here. Light goes on. Wham! Tells you how hard you punch.
Come back when you're a man.
Hey, Carlos Palomino, you're a world champion. Give it a shot.
Yo, hold my Coors Light.
What does it say? No mas, no mas.
There's no slowing down with the Silver Bullet tonight.
With this job, I need the strength of a man's antiperspirant, Speed Stick.
Today, there's Lady Speed Stick Antiperspirant with the most powerful wetness fighter available. Speed Stick protection made for women, so it's gentle.
I'd love a woman's antiperspirant that could keep me dry all day.
Lady Speed Stick glides on dry. Nothing fights wetness and odor better.
With my active schedule, delicate antiperspirants aren't enough.
Lady Speed Stick protects you like a man.
And treats you like a woman.
Lady Speed Stick.
New improved Whisk. It's not just for collars.
It's for dirty skirts, filthy shirts, dusty socks, spattered smocks, messy tees, dungarees.
New improved Whisk. It gets out ring around the collar and gets your whole wash cleaner than ever. So...
For shorts so bright, tops this white, cleaner best, Sunday best, and all the rest.
New Whisk for ring around the collar and a cleaner wash.
When his stomach balks, Davy Johnson reaches for serious medicine. Rolaids consumes all the acid required to bring millions 100% relief. And relief is needed on days like these.
I should have gone into golf.
Get serious relief. Get Rolaids.
I got a man with slow hands. He's got a face that I love to touch.
Schick Disposable has an improved blade angle to shave you closer. For the easy touch.
In a moment, our world continues, recalling the way we were. 13 days in October, 1962.
Saturday, the fun tees off with a PGA Classic. Top pros compete at the oldest event on the tour. Live, it's the Beatrice Western Open. Then on ABC's Wide World of Sports, it's a live championship bout. Undefeated Mark Breland defends his welterweight crown against the top-ranked challenger, Marlon Starling. Plus, they've won 2 races against each other. Now, Ali Sheba meets rival Bet Twice once again at the Travers Stakes live. Everybody's having fun Saturday.
ABC Sports reaching new heights.
The rush is on. Kids everywhere are dashing to their local Dairy Mart stores because the word is out. Dairy Mart is the only place for the famous unlimited carnival ride coupons, good all day Sunday at the Lane County Fair. Take your Dairy Mart coupon to the Lane County Fair ticket booth Sunday, and for just $10, ride all day long, as many times as you want. And don't forget to visit the Dairy Mart booth at the fair for the great taste of Lockmead dairy products. Get your unlimited ride coupons today at your local Dairy Mart store.
Get the year's best deals on the year's best wheels.
The Toyota model closeout sale.
It's a factory-authorized sale for you from now till August 22. So what do? Get them now.
The Toyota model closeout sale.
Cars, vans, and trucks to save you bucks. We're talking deals. Save thousands.
The Toyota model closeout sale.
Your Lane County dealers are the ones to see. With a great selection, just take it from me.
The Toyota model closeout sale.
Today.
KEZI, Eugene.
October 1962, music gives us a new folk singer, Bob Dylan. And Sony gives us a whole new way to watch television, the first Tummy TV. And the Cuban Missile Crisis gives us the return of a 50s curiosity, an idea whose time has come and gone and come again. The fallout shelter. Building or buying one of these is safer, they tell us, than hiding in the hall with our hands over our heads when a nuclear bomb falls. Right. See the water canister? The instructions say to drink the water, then use the canister as a toilet.
On Monday, October 22nd, it dawns on us that our world might soon have no drinkable water. No stout hickory limbs, for that matter. In the most important speech of his life, President Kennedy tells us about the Cuban missiles and scares us.
And I called in the network representatives, and I said, we want a half an hour tonight at 7 o'clock. And I said, what? They said, what for? And I said, for a matter of high national security.
That same night in New York, the local ABC station is about to try something brand new, an hour local newscast. In the days before minicams and satellites, it is a logistical nightmare. And it is Bill Butel's first night as anchorman.
I wish I could tell you that I heard Pierre Salinger say that there was going to be a speech that night at 7 o'clock, and that therefore I said, my heaven, we're in the midst of one of the great history-making events of the 1960s. I wish I could tell you that, but I can't. We were so involved in our own problems that we were not very concerned about the fact that President Kennedy was going to speak, except for one thing. We knew we would have a big audience because President Kennedy was coming on at 7 o'clock, and we were going to end at 6:50, 8:30.
I was a part of a poker club. There was a game planned that night, the 22nd of October, at Art Bookwald's house. And he called me up and he said, hey, should I buy the cold cuts and beers? And I said, no. He said, something really serious is going on.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
A strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
The White House press room is packed. One of the reporters, ABC's John Scally.
I remember the reporters who were watching the speech with me at the White House when the president came to that part, looking at one another and sort of gulping and knowing that this was a crisis of historic and life and death dimensions.
No one can foresee precisely what course it will take, or what costs or casualties will be incurred. But the greatest danger of all would be to do nothing.
Watching television, some of us worried that there was nothing we could do. Here at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, the big news of the week had been that Joey D and the Starlighters would play at homecoming. And then the president spoke. We watched, sitting around the dorm in our Madras wraparound skirts, our Bass-Weegian loafers, and our circle pins. And when the president was done, we rushed to the telephone to call our parents to ask what we ought to do if bombs started falling. For those living closer to Cuba, it was worse. In Miami, disc jockey Rick Shaw is taking requests and playing the hits.
I guess the emotion that comes back to mind is one of intense patriotism, and I remember that very clearly. It was the first time and the only time in the 26 years that I've been playing music in South Florida. After the speech, I got a call and a request for the national anthem.
Lincoln, Nebraska is not 90 miles from Cuba. It should feel safe. But after the president's speech, a strange occurrence. The Lincoln Civil Defense Director is Richard Vestica.
And people were edgy anyhow, and at 11:15, that siren went off. People called in radio stations. They were calling the law enforcement people. They called in the police department. They called our office. Some guy got me out of bed.
Tuesday, October 23rd.
Quarantine is translated into an official proclamation, fixing the 0 hour, 10 a.m., New York time, Wednesday, October 24th. It is signed John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
If ever I would leave you, it wouldn't be in summer.
At Washington's Shoreham Hotel, a young singer, Robert Goulet, is fresh from performing on Broadway in Camelot. He opens his nightclub act, and reviewing him, Variety describes Goulet as having been as nervous as the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
And so I was therefore very, very anxious and excited and nervous about it. And I remember, oh boy, opening night at the Shoreham, I was going on at 8 o'clock, and the president said there's a blockade. A blockade, what does that mean? That means that someone may get angry and fire a warning shot or a lot of warning shots. Could this be my last night here?
That night, also at the Shoreham, a young comedian, Mark Russell, sings this song.
The CIA picked up their pictures from the drugstore, showing where the Russians had their missile rigs. Only 90 miles away. Are they valid? Who's to say? Or are they color postcards of the Bay of Pigs? Oh, the missiles are aimed at Miami. We're sitting ducks if Khrushchev has his way. Jack knows the danger's great, but he said, I'll hesitate. I didn't carry Florida anyway. But I'm eyeball to eyeball with Nikita. On second thought, I'll launch a big attack. Bombs away without a pause. I'll nuke Fidel because it will help to get Goldwater off my back. Are the Democrats to blame for the missiles? Are they pushovers for Russians? No, I doubt it. If there was a missile strike in the dear old days of Ike, he'd be on the golf course and wouldn't know about it. Boom, boom.
Wednesday, October 24th. The naval blockade is now in place.
The Soviet ship was moving toward that line and clearly would cross it if it continued moving the next day. So I said to George, Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Anderson, George, what are you going to do when that Soviet ship hits that line? He says, damn it, we're going to stop it. What else do you think we're going to do? I said, let me tell you something. You're not going to fire any shot against that tanker with the possibility that it'll blow the damn thing up and that this will be the start of war between the Soviet Union and the U.S. without my permission, and I'm not going to give you my permission without the President's permission. Now, do you understand that? And that's when he said, the Navy's been handling quarantines and blockades, and John Paul Jones, and if you let us handle this one, we'll handle it right. And I got up and I walked out of the room.
Kennedy and the Pentagon order vulnerable, low-flying reconnaissance planes to check out the Cuban sites. The mission leader is Navy Captain William Ecker.
We manned our airplanes. There were 6 of us, 3 sections of two each. We each had a wingman, and we hit our burners, took off. I guess the best way to phrase the altitudes that we used in this were treetop level and very fast. And all of a sudden, this stuff started to appear. And again, I couldn't identify things like you see in the pictures now. But it was there, and I could see camouflage netting and so forth over it. We were able to, as I say, pin old Castro's hide to the bulkhead there.
Ecker's pictures confirm the worst. The missile sites are nearly complete, the anti-aircraft guns are in place, and there are soldiers to man those guns. Thursday, October 25th. In the UN Security Council, Ambassador Adlai Stevenson, at his most acerbic, confronts Soviet Ambassador Zorin.
Let me ask you one simple question. Do you, Ambassador Zorin, deny that the USSR has placed and is placing medium and intermediate range missiles and sites in Cuba? Yes or no? Don't wait for the translation, yes or no?
I am not in an American courtroom, sir, and therefore I do not wish to answer a question that is put to me in the fashion in which a prosecutor does. In due course, sir, you will have your reply.
I'm prepared to wait for my answer until hell freezes over, if that's your decision.
Everybody's doing a brand new dance now. Come on, baby, do the locomotion. I know you.
Fear of war is almost tangible. People who didn't know or didn't care where their neighborhood fallout shelters were suddenly are desperate to find out. Wilhelmina Harvey's husband was the mayor of Key West.
And the grocery stores were running out of groceries, particularly the little independent grocery stores. And we were going in and buying as many of the canned goods as we could buy, candles, kerosene for our old kerosene lamps. And it was a crisis in our lives, just as if a hurricane were brewing.
There were some railroad tracks that I had to go past every night on my way home. I'd never seen a train on those tracks. And I'm going home, and all of a sudden I see the gates coming down. What is this, you know? And I was the first one right up against the gate, and as the train came by, it's got tanks and soldiers.
And most of these big missiles went on the beach. And they were cordoned off with rows and rows of wire, barbed wire. And then the hotel, which had been closed and weeds were growing, why, that became the headquarters for most of the troops.
Friday, October 26th, sailors from the destroyer Joseph Kennedy Jr. board a Soviet ship. No contraband. A few hours later, someone calls ABC State Department correspondent John Scally.
I recognized the voice on the telephone immediately. It was Alexander Fomin, the minister counselor of the Soviet Union, the man that I always referred to privately as Mr. X, because his real function was to be the KGB chief, the head of all the Soviet espionage operations in the United States, and that his embassy title was no more than a cover.
Scally meets Fomin at a Washington restaurant.
His first words were, "It is very serious." And then he said, "I have an idea of a possibility," he said, "that could ease the tensions." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And then he said, "The Soviets might be willing to remove those missiles." I said, "Oh?"
A long, rambling message from Nikita Khrushchev himself seems to propose a deal. The Soviets apparently will pull out the missiles if Kennedy promises not to invade Cuba. Scally, the middleman, tells his KGB contact that the solution would be acceptable.
I'm not terrified yet.
I feel a little weak.
That night, a new play opens on Broadway. It's called The Fun Couple. It stars a young pre-aerobic, pre-political Jane Fonda and Bradford Dillman.
You think we really got married? You know, I mean, everything was in Spanish.
I paid the judge in American money.
Dillman is not worried about missiles. He has enough trouble with the show.
The opening line of Walter Kerr's review said, "The only thing that last evening proved to me is that actors do not die of embarrassment on the stage." Actually, we were dropping a bigger bomb on Broadway than Khrushchev could have ever invented. And indeed, if they had sent us out to entertain the Soviet fleet, I'm confident the Russians would have turned tail and run.
Saturday, October 27th. Suddenly, the crisis fever is higher than ever. A U-2 is shot down over Cuba. The pilot, Major Rudolf Anderson, is killed. And a second, more strident note is received from Khrushchev with unacceptable demands. Now he wants the U.S. to remove its Jupiter missiles from Turkey as a condition for a Soviet pullout from Cuba.
For a while, they didn't know how to deal with that. I mean, which of these messages do you accept? And it was Robert Kennedy who had, I think, was a brilliant idea. He said, let's assume we didn't get the second message. Let's just answer the first message. And that's what we did.
The president wanted to relax. And we went over to the little theater in the White House and watched Audrey Hepburn in Roman Holiday with Gregory Peck.
Roman Holiday is a schmaltzy, tender story of a princess in love with a newspaper man. A poignant romance that cannot have a happy ending.
And at the end of the picture, I nudged him and I said, "It's all over, Mr. President." He said, "No, it isn't, Dave, not yet." And I was thinking of Audrey Hepburn, and he was thinking of the missiles.
A White House aide gives Pierre Salinger an envelope, instructions for his family if Washington has to be evacuated.
If we have to go to that step, your family should open this envelope, which will tell them where your wife and children should go in case of that emergency. And of course, getting that envelope really gave you the impression that, I mean, we were headed for the abyss. We were headed for a disaster.
October 28th, faced with Kennedy's resolve and the threat of nuclear war, Khrushchev decides the Cuban missiles aren't worth it and backs down.
We have instructed our officers to take proper measures to stop the construction of installations, dismantle them, and bring them back to the Soviet Union.
Now I cross over to meet the president for the 10 o'clock mass, and as he stepped into the car, into the White House limousine, he said, "Dave, this morning we have an extra reason to pray."
And on that Sunday morning, the president offers prayers of thanksgiving. He's elated. He suspects this might be the high point of his presidency, and referring to Abraham Lincoln, he says to Bobby, "This is the night I should go to the theater." Meanwhile, the rest of the country, not knowing the fever has broken, not knowing the crisis has passed, still is praying for deliverance. It will be much later in the day, after Khrushchev's response can be checked and rechecked, before the American people learn that deliverance already has arrived.
In that transition between threat and deliverance, the fear does not suddenly vanish. It ebbs like a brackish tide. That same Sunday, when the crisis breaks, a New York newspaper has a special supplement on how to conduct yourself in the event of nuclear attack. Pedestrians are told that any cover, even a newspaper, over face and exposed skin will minimize burns during the 3/1000ths of a second peak heat radiation that travels with the speed of light. In your office, it says, with the flash of the explosion, dive flat behind a desk or between filing cabinets. If there's time, get to the center of your building. And no child will be allowed to leave school during or immediately after a nuclear attack, nor will parents be encouraged to try to take them out. Parental tolerance has never been put to that awful test. Come back to October 1962 and some things we seem to have learned from those longest days.
Hey, Chris, can't go surfing dressed like that.
Can't today. Going home.
Home? I thought you were staying all week.
Mom wanted ice cream last night. Dad couldn't find our money.
What, did he lose it?
Somebody stole it.
I'm sorry. We'll see you next summer, though, huh?
Yeah.
It could happen to you right here in the U.S., so don't carry cash. Carry American Express traveler's checks. Don't leave home without them.
Aquafresh case history 43. Jim Edwards, Aquafresh user. Never had a cavity in his life. But at 17, facing new problems, gum disease and bad breath. Recommendation, now more than ever needs a complete toothpaste. Triple protection Aquafresh. It fights cavities with fluoride, freshens breath, and helps remove plaque to reduce early gum disease called gingivitis in one complete toothpaste.
Jim, this is really important.
Aquafresh. More than cavity protection, triple protection.
I'm an apple lover. Sunny apple lover. Sunny apple lover.
You love the Big Apple taste of Riunite Sunny Apple. The taste of fresh apples and natural Riunite, not a watered-down cooler.
Sunny apple lover. Riunite sunny apple lover.
Try peach and raspberry, too.
Riunite.
He's back.
By the way, Max has been after you.
Get him off. Interested in me.
I can't make him stop unless he wants to.
Max Headroom.
To tomorrow.
Albert Einstein once was asked what would happen in the event of nuclear war. Well, he said, we would no longer be able to listen to the music of Mozart. The Cuban Missile Crisis did not become World War III. Mozart was not canceled. That was a fine moment. But like any moment, what is good for some is not so good for others. Concerning the events in those 2 weeks in October 1962, there is good news and bad news. First, the good news.
Return to sender. Return to sender.
It took a few tense weeks to iron out the details, but the missiles were dismantled, crated, and sent back to the Soviet Union. They have never returned. The superpowers had looked nuclear war in the face and had not liked what they saw. In August of the following year, the first hotline between the Kremlin and the White House was installed. Now our leaders could talk before they struck. And the United States, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain signed the world's first treaty banning nuclear tests above ground. In 1964, Kremlin hardliners threw Khrushchev out.
Now the bad news. The race to build more weapons did intensify, and even the Soviets admit it had something to do with the humiliation they felt at being forced to back down in Cuba in October 1962. In 1986, it's the nearness of countries like Nicaragua that has us training Contras. If the Soviets could arm Cuba, why not Nicaragua?
Using Nicaragua as a base, the Soviets and Cubans can become the dominant power in the crucial corridor between North and South America.
As for the other players in October 1962, well, Richard Nixon was not elected governor of California and decided to quit politics.
You don't have Nixon to kick around anymore. Because, gentlemen, this is my last press conference.
We were wrong about his career. He was wrong about us kicking him around some more.
I just figured out what my life work's going to be. Oh, well, could you close the door before you tell me? Well, sure, Mom.
And all those overwhelmingly contented sitcom families, well, we still got them.
Nothing's changed. I'm still the beaver.
Well, there it is, the way it was for a couple of nasty weeks in October of 1962. President Kennedy had just finished reading The Guns of August, Barbara Tuchman's new account of how the great European powers had bungled their way into World War I. Kennedy had blundered into the Bay of Pigs in 1961, and he was determined not to blunder again in the same place. He succeeded by being brave enough to choose the more timid course, an active response short of war. The quarantine put the onus back on Khrushchev. Now it was the Soviets who had to back down or bear the responsibility for nuclear war. Khrushchev chose humiliation for himself, peace for the world, and it doomed him. 2 years later, he would be out of power. Kennedy would be dead. The abyss is still there, ready to snare their successors, but nobody has come that close to the edge again.
How much of a threat were those Soviet missiles in Cuba? A big one, we believed. But then Cuba also felt threatened, and with reason. In 1961, we had invaded that country. Cuba was then, and is now, the only nation in our world with both Soviet and American military installations within its borders. Did we learn anything from the near miss of October 1962? We learned the atomic age was here to stay, but were we? Are we? Khrushchev told a story about the Russian peasant so poor he had to share a house with a goat. The man got used to the smell, but he never liked the arrangement. Cuba, said Khrushchev, was America's goat. From where we stood, the goat looked Russian. Now, in 1986, the whole damn place is full of animals and the complaints are louder. But now we know something else, too. We know that waking up in a room full of goats beats the alternative. Sure, the goats still stink, but the house still stands. And so it goes.
Got the same old bowl
and the same old spoon.
But here's a tasty fiber breakthrough that's brand new. It's the drumstick. It's for brand new. It's a breakthrough. I said for brand new.
Kellogg's Nutrific blends the goodness of wheat, corn, barley, and oat brands.
It's nutritious.
In dark, hearty flakes.
It's terrific.
With almond-covered raisins and almond slivers.
It's nutrific. Nutrific. It's for brand new.
Humor helps you deal with life's unexpected possibilities, and so does MasterCard. If you lose it, which I did, they replace it. Thank you. And thank you, MasterCard. MasterCard, master the possibilities.
Hi there. You looking for Mr. Right?
Give this guy a light.
Wow.
And Bud Light here.
Ask for Bud Light, the light beer with the first name and taste. Because everything else is just a light.
Thanks. Keep the chains.
Tonight,
Understanding the mind of a fanatical Shiite Muslim. Find out why they commit acts we find so horrifying and why they hate us so much. Watch 2020 next.
Also in October 1962.
The Soviet Union wins the Chess Olympics. The United States, with Bobby Fischer playing first board, finishes fourth.
The U.S. Surgeon General forms a panel to find out if cigarette smoking is harmful.
Edith Piaf, 47, marries her protege, a former hairdresser. He is 23.
The Air Force Surgeon General announces there will be no more free cigarettes in Air Force hospitals.
Huntington Hartford II, heir to the A&P millions, marries Diane Brown, a model. His third marriage, her first.
Chicken noodle is Campbell's most popular soup. It sells for 18 cents a can.
Lana Turner files for a Mexican divorce from her fifth husband, Fred May.
The New York City Ballet performs before a packed house in Moscow.
Officials at Wimbledon decree that women tennis players must wear white, all white, including panties.
The Leningrad Orchestra performs to a packed house in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
In Hollywood, Lenny Bruce is arrested for speaking obscene words in a public place.
For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
You can make a difference. Help someone learn how to read.
Meet the men of One Life to Live. Cord Roberts, his heart only belongs to one.
You are stuck with me for life.
Max Holden, a cocky kid with a lot of charm. And Steve Holden, trying to...
Don't skip class this year. Eugene Athletics Shoe Corner has the right shoe at the right price with the latest styles and colors during this year's back-to-school sale. The Tiger Pack 2 volleyball shoe, only $39.95. The Adidas Option Low football shoe, just $41.95. Nike's Hotspur soccer shoe, only $36.95. And the Nike Zoom X2 cross-country shoe, just $42.95. Top quality footwear with expert advice and service at Eugene Athletics back-to-school sale on the downtown mall.
For your #1 deal on the #1 selling trucks in the U.S., see Kendall Ford now. Over 200 units must be sold during the summer sell-down sale. 2- and 4-wheel drive Ranger pickups and Bronco 2s with 1.9% financing or up to $1,000 rebates. Plus $500 rebates on selected F-Series pickups, 2- and 4-wheel drive Super Cabs, Crew Cabs, and more. The #1 buy now with top savings during the summer sell-down sale at Kendall Ford, Valley River, and Springfield.
Women in High Places on the next Oprah Winfrey Show.
Oprah will make your day, Friday morning at 10.
KEZI-TV, Eugene.
When we remember a time, we remember moments. A kaleidoscope of the sights, the sounds, the emotions that remind us of the way we were. Our world. It's about time. Tonight, Period of Adjustment, Fall 1946. Here are Linda Ellerby and Ray Gandolf.
For the next hour, think of your television set as a time machine.
And practice adjusting the controls a little. Where we're going tonight, adjustment is imperative.
Welcome to autumn 1946. During the war, Americans told each other there's no place like home. Now they add, including home. What's going on here? If the economy's nearly doubled in 6 years, why can't you find a decent steak anywhere? Why is the government playing Buck Rogers with one bunch of Germans while it tries to hang another bunch? And another thing, just where did all these babies come from? Come election day, somebody around here better have some answers.
At the end of World War II, there were about 12 million men and women in the U.S. Armed Forces. By the fall of 1946, little more than a year later, 10 million of them were civilians again. We had adjusted to life without them, and they to life without us. Now, it was time to readjust, but not go back.
Blue sky, smiling at me, nothing but blue sky do I see.
Home again. Peace had put an end to 4 years of war, as war had put an end to 10 years of depression. But if you saw nothing but blue skies, then you saw the world in black and white, and you were in for a surprise. The Best Years of Our Lives, the movie that came closest to telling the truth about people getting back to normal. It starred Dana Andrews, Frederick March, and an unknown named Harold Russell.
But it talked about the realism. And what happened to 3 guys who came home? What happened to those 3 people when they came home? In a sense, answered the question of what happened to 17 million who came back.
Harold Russell was not an actor playing a sailor who lost his hands. Harold Russell was a soldier who lost his hands when they were blown off on D-Day in North Carolina by accident. Diary of a Sergeant, a training film made by the Army. In it, the camera followed Harold Russell as he learned to use his hooks. Russell said nothing in the film and said it loud enough to be heard, even in Hollywood.
William Wyler wanted to produce a picture that was real, that people could look at and believe in and understand and know. And I think he did everything so real. In those days, black and white was real. That's how the world was, and that was how you told a story. You didn't color it up. I think that was the difference. Pictures before that, for the most part, didn't really deal with realism as Best Years of Our Lives did. The problems they had of readjusting. A kid coming home without any hands, how is he going to deal with his childhood sweetheart? You know, this kind of thing. The Air Force guy, Dana, he had a problem because he'd married this Flossie before he went overseas, and she felt cheated that he'd married this glamorous flyboy. Came back, he couldn't get a job even as a soda jerk. Frederick Marsh, the sergeant, he'd been a grunt. He'd climbed the mountains and fought the enemy face to face. And he came back now to adjust to a life of a banker. He was going to be vice president of a bank. And he couldn't understand it. This is crazy. So that in any way, there was a different kind of adjustment. Everybody had this adjustment to make, just as they had an adjustment to make when they went in the service. That was a different kind of a life. Different kind of a life entirely.
For more than 1 million veterans, the different kind of life was college on the GI Bill, now in its 2nd year. 800,000 vets were enrolled in colleges in the fall of 1946. Another 250,000 couldn't get on to the bulging campuses and had to wait for a year. At Indiana University in Bloomington, enrollment more than doubled in 1 year. Former Army Sergeant Frank Jones was a sophomore.
The younger students on the campus right out of high school, I know one thing they couldn't understand is how we realized how lucky we were to get home. Everybody had friends and people they knew that didn't get home. I served and came up through New Guinea and the Philippines, and I saw war as war really is. It's hell. I was in my office, in the office where I was working at the time as an undergraduate student, and this Japanese student came in, and he shook me up. I couldn't, it took me a minute to realize why I was so shook up by recognizing here's a Japanese young guy, and hell, he was a student just like I was. But that's something that I'll never forget, and it happened.
Student housing, even classrooms, were makeshift, temporary, and uncomfortable. No ivy-covered walls here. There were 2 million students on college campuses that fall. 40% of them were ex-GIs, getting $65 a month if they were single, $90 if they were married. plus free tuition. And they were serious. The ex-GIs did not wear freshman beanies or swallow goldfish. They studied. A college education was something that many, if not most of them, could not have afforded, and they weren't about to blow their chance. There was a sense of urgency of getting on with their lives. They married. They had children. Sometimes, to supplement their GI allotment, they worked. Their spouses worked. For married students, college was no honeymoon.
Prior to World War II, there weren't very many married undergraduate students. And you just didn't know whether you could make it. The GI Bill helped, but you had to work too.
Frank and Jerry Jones were married in 1944.
We had $90 a month. Our rent was $25. But that included everything. I mean, to go get the, what did we burn, kerosene?
Yeah.
Something that explodes, I know.
Kerosene.
We ate a lot of Spam.
Yeah.
Got to be a tradition in our family.
She knows how to make Spam 10 or 12 different ways. As I arrived here, it was kind of a shock because from the point of view of seeing the size of the trailer that we had rented. You know, when you come to a little trailer where there's no running water and there's a gravel with sidewalks, and you look over at your mother-in-law who's looking down at you kind of like, my God, you don't think my daughter's going to live here, do you?
Plus, everybody was in the same situation. And so it all was kind of a joke. I mean, did you blow up your stove today? Or did you empty the sink and forget that there wasn't any pipes? It just ran out on the floor.
And here I'm married and got a little boy, and that little boy acted like most babies. He didn't act like he should all the time. And it was a double adjustment that we all had to make. But maybe that was easier in the situation where we were in, where we had all veterans around us.
Not all vets were married, and not all students were vets. She's a girl. His girl. He may have been born too late to go to war. It was just in time to take advantage of supply and demand and a varsity sweater. The thing shouts, big man on campus. Or it did, until the shouting was reduced to a pipsqueak by this, the bomber jacket. Doesn't shout, doesn't have to. And you don't get it playing ball games. Now you don't get her playing ball games either, right? Come back to the fall of 1946.
Our world will continue with a period of adjustment. Fall 1946.
Humor helps you deal with life's unexpected possibilities, and so does MasterCard. If you lose it, which I did, they replace it. Thank you. And thank you, MasterCard. MasterCard, master the possibilities.
One rockin' evening at the Silver Bullet.
This band sure is loud. Oh, thanks. I just bought it.
Want to dance?
No, they got Good Lights.
You can't hear me, can you? I think you're beautiful. In fact, I think you look so hot in here, isn't it? Of course, it's not so much the heat as it is the humidity.
There's no slowing down at the Silver Bullet tonight.
Pardon me, folks. How do you like your new Ford Aerostar?
Oh, it's great.
Think you can tell me about it in less than 30 seconds?
Well, it does so many things. We take the kids to school.
We go to the drive-in movie.
We tow the boat.
And the dirt bikes. We brought the new table home.
Helped your sister move.
Took my French club to the airport. Sometimes we sleep in it.
I drove it to the prom. The kids listen to their music in it.
I can carry the fellas to the golf course.
We took
Sorry, you're out of time.
I didn't get a tour.
Ford Aerostar.
Cal-Can asked top breeders, how would you make the ideal dog food?
I'd have big chunks of meat.
It should have a good meaty smell to it.
No soy, the meat protein, a good balance of vitamins and minerals.
I like it to be firm, come out of the can in a solid chunk.
Introducing new Cal-Can Pedigree, packed with meaty chunks from top to bottom. The best ever Cal-Can.
The Cal-Can Pedigree is a super product.
And the quality is all the way through that can.
They lick the platter clean, and they look great. What more can I ask for?
New Cal-Can Pedigree.
The American Express card carries the promise of respect, recognition, unsurpassed personal service wherever you go. But you can't carry the card until you carry one of these home. So apply for membership today.
We got an abdominal GSW in trauma 1. Attention, new mode on the way in.
OR staff is ready.
Anesthesia?
It's on standby.
Man's paler than a potato. What's his BP?
I think he might...
Spare me the thinking, Kyle. Just get him upstairs on a double. Dr. Meyer, let's get scrubbed and earn us a living. Come on, Doctor. This ain't no rehearsal.
Welcome back to the fall of 1946. The birth rate was soaring, the post-war baby boom had begun, and from now on, along with their toys and booties and rattles, babies would be treated with more hugging and kissing and common sense than any generation that had gone before, courtesy of Dr. Benjamin Spock. We'll meet Dr. Spock in a few minutes, but before we celebrate the joy of birth, we note the death on October 16th of 11 of the most evil men the world has ever known. In Nuremberg, Germany, in the first war crimes trial in history, the Allies had sentenced 7 Nazi leaders to prison, acquitted 3, and condemned 11 to the hangman.
October 1st, Nuremberg. The 11 Nazis who will be hanged for war crimes and crimes against humanity on the morning of their sentencing. October 15th, the night before the executions. A suicide watch is on to prevent those responsible for taking millions of lives from taking their own lives. And an American reporter is allowed into the cell block for a look at the prisoners. Joseph Kingsbury Smith of the International News Service.
The last one that I looked at was Goering's cell. And when I looked through, his cot was on the left side of the cell, small cell. He was lying halfway against the wall on the cot. He was reading a book. I couldn't tell from the distance what it was about, but I later learned that it was entitled With the Passage Birds to Africa. And it was a sort of a tourist book.
But within the hour, Reichsmarshal Hermann Wilhelm Goering is dead, and nobody seems to know where he got the cyanide. October 16th, just after 1 a.m., the remaining 10 are led across the courtyard to the gallows, where the oldest testament to victory will prevail.
They mounted the 13 forbidding wooden steps of the black scaffolds under the glare of bright electric lights. The most excited and enraged man of all was Julius Streicher, the Jew baiter. Just as he was about to mount the steps leading up to the platform on which he was to hang, he shrieked at the top of his voice, Heil Hitler.
And he was the only one who groaned when they fell through the trap. So later, after it was all over, I got in touch with the GI sergeant who had handled it. And I asked him why Streicher was the only one to groan. And he said, well, it's very simple because I strangled the bastard. He explained by adjusting the noose correctly, if you didn't adjust it correctly and brought it to one side, not at the back of the neck, then the man would strangle to death.
The men who built the Nazi war machine had been punished. Their machines remained. The V-2 rocket. Captured Nazi film showed us the terrible weapon that tore London apart. Finally, the real thing was captured in pieces and was being kept at the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico. Component parts for 100 V-2 rockets. Souvenirs brought home by the U.S. Army. American engineers also understood that with no bomb at the end of it, the V-2 was simply a means of transportation, and with adjustments, a technology that might one day take man to the moon. James Fagan was an engineer, and he was there.
We were participating in one of the two major advances, I guess, of the 20th century. Of course, the one being the atomic energy, and the other one being the field of rocketry.
The news reeled with stories about German rockets, American scientists, and victory over tomorrow. An all-American victory with a little help from their friends, the German scientists, those former enemy aliens that were smuggled into this country in 1945. Like that fellow named Werner von Braun. And a member of his team, Konrad Dannenberg.
Even for the German crew, many of the things we did in White Sands with the V-2 launchings were relatively new. Up to that point, we had to make many, many guesses as to the upper layers of the atmosphere. What temperatures do we have? What air composition? And now for the very first time, we could actually go up there and measure these things. And in those conditions, of course, we were really now for the first time in outer space.
In a way, they already were, being confined to base in the American desert, except for certain chaperoned field trips for science.
I was for the first time exposed to milkshakes in those days. That was one of the great innovations.
The life that existed out there was a group of men who, for activities, had only 2 or 3 things they could do. They could drink beer, they could walk in the desert, or they could launch V2s. Well, the atmosphere of the early V2 firings in White Sands, I think, could best be described by the word chaotic. That was the period before the formal countdown. I mean, there was none of this business of X minus 24 hours. It was, hey, Albert, is such and such ready to go, you know, and then the firing would take place.
And on October 10th, a V2 rocket armed with a camera rose 102 miles above us and showed us a world without man-made boundaries, but with plenty of room. A cosmic joke to people who wanted rooms, not room. Why couldn't a house go up as fast as a rocket? Ta-da, the prefab house.
There ain't nobody here but us chickens. There ain't nobody here at all.
This is the slow way. What's more, this particular way is different, quite different. Back in 1939, a dozen Philadelphia families had bought 240 acres of countryside and begun a cooperative housing project. They called it Bryn Gwylyd, which is Welsh for Hill of Vision. Their vision was a community that would be based on sharing. After the war, more families joined in, and some got a little luck when it came to building materials.
We were fortunate in having a cousin up in Maine that cut lumber.
Bill Maxfield, an engineer, was already at Bryn Gwylyd and trying to get going.
But we started so early that we couldn't even get windows that we wanted, and I couldn't even finish the drawings of the house until I could find windows that were going to be delivered.
Getting doors and windows was often tougher than hanging on to an idea. Edward Potts had the dream before he had the house.
The original idea was, 1, to live in the country when you couldn't otherwise afford it, and 2, to be mixed with all kinds of different people, interracial, interfaith, and grow up, and bring your kids up knowing other people so that they weren't all prejudiced.
What we're interested in is this cooperation. People that are interested in being on committees. There's a lot of committees work. There's about 20 committees.
Oh, and remember when we made those forms for the septic tank? Somebody built forms that several of us were going to use, and everybody would go pour the concrete for a given house together, and then we moved to somewhere else. Eventually, I think the forms fell apart. I don't know.
The land was owned communally, but the houses were owned individually. The work was done communally, but the children were done individually, so to speak. There was plenty of work, and there were plenty of children. The idea was to attempt to become as self-sufficient as possible. These people had lived through a depression when too many people had plenty of nothing. If they were determined to live in a land of plenty, they were determined to get it from their own land, their own animals. The carrots, however, were not for the rabbits. Some people had begun to think of sharing as dangerous instead of neighborly.
The word seemed to get around from some of them that we were a bunch of free-love communists, or I don't know what all. I mean,
But we knew each other so well, and we did things together, and sometimes one parent would stay at home with the children, and the other one would go to a meeting, and it would be perhaps the man of one family and the woman of another family. That was rather shocking. I think they were concerned.
Community living by a few dozen families was no answer to the acute post-war housing shortage. In October, President Truman declared a housing emergency. In Atlanta, 2,000 people answered an ad for one apartment. Veterans were home from the war and making babies, whether they had a place to live or not. Nearly 3.5 million babies were born in 1946, a 20% jump in the birth rate in 1 year. And the babies had a Pied Piper, a prominent New York pediatrician, Benjamin Spock. While in the Navy, Dr. Spock had written Baby and Child Care, a runaway bestseller in the fall of '46.
The first sentence in the book is, trust yourself, you know more than you think you do. And then it goes on to say, don't be overawed by the experts and don't be intimidated by your relatives. The editor who came to me about writing the book said, it doesn't have to be very good, he said, because at 25 cents a copy, which was what the price was in 1946, we can sell, he said, 10,000 a year. Well, he was thinking of 10,000, and it turned out to be 750,000.
To illustrate his instructions, Spock chose one of the leading baby artists and illustrators of the day, Dorothea Fox, herself the mother of an infant.
Those illustrations that I did for Dr. Spock were the first and only ones that I did without using a pencil, without drawing them carefully first. I just was so full of the idea, the way Dr. Spock had explained it to me, that I just sat down and did them. One of the reasons I did that was because I didn't think it was a very important job. It turns out to be almost the most important thing I did and I've done in my life.
Spock was a hero to Anne Maxfield.
It was our Bible. And if someone else didn't have one and somebody had a particular ailment, then you would go home and look it up in Dr. Spock's book, and then they would get Dr. Spock's book, too. It was really wonderful.
As a pediatrician in practice, I was impressed with how much anxiety there is in the beginning parent. I saw on a few occasions mothers burst into tears as they left the hospital.
Before Spock, many doctors treated babies like little adults and parents like dummies.
When we went to the baby doctor, we got a sheaf of typewritten schedules, the hour, that time that we should do something for our baby. And I didn't do it very well anyway, but I was always a little guilty about not doing it very well, you know, thinking I'm not raising this baby right. Instead of what Dr. Spock says is you have instincts. You know more than you think you do.
For several years, I worried very much whether some parent might not tell me that though I had the best of intentions, I had brought about injury or had even killed their child. And it was one of the comforts as the years went by that nobody accused me of having killed their baby.
And what will they name the baby? By 1946, ethnic favorites such as Rosie and Sarah and Samuel were gone, leaving Susan, Carol, James, and Joseph, and William, usually known as just plain Bill, an ordinary guy. The most common boy name? Robert. The most common girl name? Well, a little inaccuracy right here would save a world of explanation. But little inaccuracies are for amateurs, so I'll try to explain. See, it was my intention to have a bit of good, clean fun with all those clean, white bread names. Who knew the most popular girl name would turn out to be Linda? Linda. Personally, I'd prefer Rosie or Bill. Come back to the autumn of 1946 and give 'em hell, Harry.
Our world will be right back. Period of adjustment. Fall 1946.
Peachy, 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 real needy. Peachy, 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 real needy.
From out of the peach comes Riuniti Natural Peach. Bursting with a taste of fresh peaches. Not a watered-down cooler, just natural Riuniti.
Peachy, peachy.
Riuniti Natural Peach. You'll go peaches over it.
Peachy, Riuniti.
And try apple and raspberry, too. Aquafresh case history 43. Jim Edwards, Aquafresh user. Never had a cavity in his life. But at 17, facing new problems, gum disease and bad breath. Recommendation, now more than ever, needs a complete toothpaste. Triple Protection Aquafresh. It fights cavities with fluoride, freshens breath, and helps remove plaque to reduce early gum disease called gingivitis in one complete toothpaste.
Jim, this is really important.
Aquafresh. More than cavity protection, triple protection.
The fiber in Kellogg's Mini Wheats helps keep me flying right, but it's the delicious frosting that fuels my youthful appetite.
Small problem. The shredded wheat nutrition gives me that drive, but the kid in me loves to tackle the tasty side.
Kellogg's Mini Wheats, shredded wheat nutrition for the adult in you, delicious taste for that part of you that'll never grow up.
The fiber in Mini Wheats gives me a great start. But when it comes to the great taste, I'm just a kid at heart.
I'll have what she's having.
Kiss, kiss, lemon. You want a moist lemon cake, but have just 7 minutes to bake. A microwave cake is moist, can it be? It's microwave from Pillsbury. Loving from the oven, Pillsbury. We're warm, we're hot, beep, beep, pop, pop. The microwave cake, they'll love a lot. Lemon, lemon, giggle, giggle. Loving from the oven, beep, beep.
Oh, buttermilk sky.
Our world will be right back.
What's the good word tonight? Are you gonna be mellow tonight? Oh, buttermilk sky. Can't you see my little donkey and me? We're as happy as a Christmas tree.
Have fun this Sunday on ABC Sports. First, it's good times on the gridiron as the college football season gets underway. It's an intersectional rivalry as the Big Ten powerhouse Iowa Hawkeyes take on the Tennessee Volunteers. Live, Mazda presents the Kickoff Classic. Then, top amateurs swing for glory at the oldest championship in the country. It's the U.S. Amateur Golf Championship. Everybody's having fun Sunday.
ABC Sports, reaching new heights.
Attention, Western Oregon. Emerald Chrysler Plymouth has just made a special purchase of 30 1987 LeBaron Coupes, and you can take your choice for just $11,995. That's right, pick from 30 LeBaron Coupes for only $11,995. And these luxurious cars have automatic transmission, air conditioning, AM/FM stereo, and much, much more. Plus, get 1.9% financing or $750 cash back. But at this price, they won't last long. So come in today to Emerald Chrysler Plymouth, West 7th at Highway 99 in Eugene. Don't miss it.
The Grand Tree Liquidation Center in Springfield has some terrific deals lined up for you this weekend. Over $500,000 of quality home furnishings at sale price for immediate disposal. Twin-size mattress sets only $98. Full-size mattress sets only $148. Solid pine bunk beds $88. Day beds, the frame and rails only $68. Oak secretary desk, regular $8.99, now $3.99. Shop and compare. The Grand Tree Liquidation Center next to the Red Lion in Springfield has the best buys on quality home furnishings. Open daily 10 to 9, Saturday 10 to 6, Sunday 12 until 5.
KEZI-TV, Eugene.
Welcome back to the autumn of 1946. Something we like to call the American way of life has been altered forever by a war that was fought to preserve it. And a country which came together in order to defeat the enemy outside must hold together still or risk winning the war only to lose the peace. What it is a national attitude adjustment hour, only longer.
The executions at Nuremberg were big news in this country that fall, but they were also, in a way, old news. We were having a hard time getting adjusted to peacetime, but we had a lot of fun trying.
Before there was a jet set, there was Cafe Society. Same people. But now, plenty of plain Janes and ordinary Joes could rub elbows with the mighty. Cash in their pockets, no war to worry about, no guilt. Live, love, and get happy. At the Stork Club, singer, actress, and socialite Benet Venuta.
And I wore one pair of shoes all during the war, one pair of Dorsey black leather shoes. They were so awful by the time I could throw them away. And in those days, the music was live, and you danced, and it was romantic. There was a lot of romance, and it was a gentler time, softer. You could walk down Fifth Avenue, and you saw people beautifully dressed. Not everybody, but most of the people. Ladies wore gloves and hats, no blue jeans. The only blue jeans you would see would be on a ranch or maybe on a farm.
Women had tasted independence during the war, Rosie the Riveter and all that. The taste did not linger. The post-war woman returned to the pre-war feminine ideal, as in the hit song from the Broadway show, Annie Get Your Gun.
The girl that I marry will have to be as soft and as pink as a nursery. The girl...
Housewife and homemaker were still proud words in the fall of '46. Johnny came marching home again and went back to work. And Rosie the Riveter, well, she got married and took her proper place on the end of a vacuum cleaner. And if you could find a place to live, this period of adjustment wasn't so bad. Or was it?
The war brought inflation, then price controls, then came peace. Some prices stayed controlled. Some shortages got worse, but inflation came back too. And the buck, what was left of it, did indeed stop at the president's desk. Clark Clifford, a presidential advisor, watched Truman juggle which prices would stay controlled and which would not.
President Truman had a rather cute little puckish sense of humor. And one day, he noticed as he went through the list, that particular day, the Office of Price Control had released controls on Hawaiian sleigh bells. You can imagine anything more ridiculous than Hawaiian sleigh bells. So he sat down and wrote a little note to Paul Porter, who was head of OPA, said, "Dear Paul, it's decisions like this that will bring us out on top."
The same cannot be said concerning meat. In June, price controls were lifted, prices soared. In August, price controls were reinstated. Cattlemen stopped shipping their cows to market. Meat began to disappear from the market, except for the black market, even bigger now than during the war. Harry Oppenheimer was a butcher, and butchers were good people to know.
The butchers, they were the kings. You had your steady trade. The meat was put in a bag. There was no questions asked how much. People were satisfied to get their meat, and they didn't ask what it was, how much it was. They just got a bag of meat with their name on, and they walk out. And if they should ask too many questions, next time there wouldn't be any meat for them. It's as simple as that.
But meatless voters were opposition voters, and so...
During these last weeks, I have considered many proposed remedies in an effort to find the proper solution of this meat problem. There is only one remedy left. That is to lift controls on meat.
Bingo! The cows came back, but not all at once. There was still a scarcity, but you could more often than not get red meat now. All you needed was money. Retail prices went up 20 to 100%. Grin and buy it, or squawk and eat chicken.
Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union.
And prices went up faster than wages did. Unions that had signed a no-strike pledge during the war reminded everybody that the war was over. Union membership had gone from 9 to 15 million, and now strikes, like firecrackers, exploded all over the place. And the rest of the country got angry. But it didn't stop the unions, especially not in that place closest to the heart of American industry, the coal mine. America ran on coal. It supplied nearly all the power used by railways, 2/3 of the electric power, and 1/2 of the factory power. And coal ran on coal miners.
My daddy was a miner, and I'm a miner's son.
They had struck in the spring. In May, the government had seized the mines and forced the mine owners to negotiate.
The mine owners wanted to participate in the prosperity following the war. They were perfectly willing to have increases in the price of coal, but they didn't want to increase the wages of the workers.
Not a new idea, certainly, but not a popular one with the miners like Elmer Webb,
who went off to the war and came back to go down in the mines.
All the time it was getting out from under the yoke of the coal company master. They was king. They owned your body and soul.
For John Protan, the same old story.
You had to live in a company house. You had to deal in a company store. You had to pay your company doctors. In fact, I had 2 of my kids was born in a company house, which no running water, no gas heat, and outside toilet. So you could figure what kind of houses they was. No miners hardly ever seen a penny, because if they had any money coming to them, they'd be overdrafted and wouldn't draw any money.
The mines, the mine workers, and the United Mine Workers. John L. Lewis, head of the UMW. He was a hero to the Union and a boogeyman to much of the nation. And now he was threatening another strike. His power should not be underestimated. Certainly the government did not underestimate it.
John L. Lewis was a very dramatic fellow. His appearance was very dramatic. He had a great leonine head with a great shock of white hair and enormously bushy black eyebrows. So every time you saw him, he would start back a little this way.
Yes, but where did you go from there? Well, there was the ballot box. Americans were caught in the middle of a maladjusted economy, buffeted about by inflation, shortages, and strikes. Would they blame big business, unions, or Democrats? Would the Congress that returned be the one that left?
Nobody had a more difficult time adjusting to post-war life than Harry Truman, the piano player in the White House. In little more than a year, his popularity rating had fallen from 87 to 32% in the polls. Republicans were asking, had enough? Come back to the congressional elections of 1946 when America went to the polls and answered that question.
Our world continues. Period of adjustment, fall 1946.
New Chicken Little sandwiches from Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Chicken Littles, you're the one, so tender and so sweet. Little bitty pretty one, my 39-cent treat. Chicken Littles, you're the one, you taste so good to me. Little bitty pretty one, only a KFC.
They cost just a little, but people love them a lot.
Every day, over 30 million AT&T calls go through on the first try. Thanks to a remarkably intelligent network that forecasts traffic, anticipates tie-ups, and determines the quickest way around them. All in less time than it takes to dial. The AT&T network, you can call it the mastermind of long distance.
Glad I got through.
We're reaching further to bring your world closer. AT&T, the right choice.
Belongs to Michelob.
Friday.
I wonder where this wire goes.
What's that head doing here?
Hello.
He's shoulders above the rest.
What a team.
Max Headroom.
The roar of the crowd, the men of the people. Time magazine calls this one boyish, raw-boned, Harvard-bred John Kennedy. And him, dark, lanky, Quaker attorney Richard Nixon. He's Joe McCarthy. Time magazine says he's Wisconsin's jovial Republican. He's also determined to be a United States Senator. The other two plan to start with the House, and I know, politics is serious. Baseball, however, is important. That's why Election Day is in November. October is reserved for the World Series, and St. Louis is about to adjust Boston's attitude. Excuse me. Excuse me. It wasn't supposed to go 7 games, but nobody told the Cardinals, so there they were in St. Louis. Enos Country Slaughter is about to bat for the home team.
It was a great series, and we, went into the final game, the 7th game of the World Series, tied at 3-all.
Enos Slaughter leads off against Bob Klinger, last of the 8th, and singles to center for St. Louis.
2 outs later, Harry the Hat Walker comes to bat. Slaughter is on first.
You know, I walk out, I don't think about anything but just hitting the ball. I'm not worried about Slaughter or anything else. I didn't know that Slaughter was stealing even.
Walker hits, Slaughter runs. The Boston center fielder fields the ball and throws it to the shortstop, Johnny Pesky. And what happened next made all the difference.
When I get the ball, and a lot of people said that I went like this.
Did he stumble? Stutter? The point is not what he did, but what he didn't do.
I'm looking over my shoulder to find where the runner is.
And he didn't stop and throw the ball. He didn't drop his hand. He turned, kind of looked at me and went right onto the plate. But I think in his turning, he didn't get the drive on the ball he normally would. And that made the ball just a little bit less lively coming to the plate.
And here comes Country. Head down, digging all the way.
I got to make over 250-foot throw. It just wasn't good enough.
Slaughter kept on going, scoring all the way from first, when the relay throw from Johnny Pesky reached home too late for a play on Slaughter.
He scored a run. We won. I got the World Series ring, and we got a big check of $3,700.
I wish I could take an eraser and erase that out of my whole life, thinking that I was responsible, and it's I'll tell you, it broke my heart, really.
Slaughter wasn't supposed to score, St. Louis wasn't supposed to win, and a split second changed everything. Welcome back, baseball.
Ah, and politics. Truman's term wasn't up, but over in the Congress, the race was on. 29-year-old John Kennedy was running in his first congressional race, but he was the favorite, despite the fact he was running in a Boston district he'd only recently moved to, and in fact, he spent much of his time in Palm Beach, a town way outside Boston. Dave Powers tells the story of the candidate and the heckler who shouted,
"You are a carpetbagger." And Jack walked right over to the front of the stage and pointed at him, and he said, "No one asked me my address when I was on a PT boat in the Solomon Islands. And don't you forget it." And the crowd cheered because this was a veteran audience. And in 1946, if you did not have the word veteran beside your name, you could not be elected dog catcher.
In Wisconsin, Joe McCarthy was not running for dog catcher. He wanted to be a senator, and he too had the word veteran beside his name. But his nickname, Tail Gunner Joe, it was just as phony as the picture this desk-bound officer had posed for. His friend, Urban Van Susteren, explains McCarthy's political goals.
He had a real desire to have prestige, to be respected and admired by his fellow men, by all of society. Yes, he did indeed.
At a hotel in Whittier, California, the year before, hungry Republicans of California's 12th Congressional District were looking for a bright new candidate. Fred Harmson was on the Committee of 100.
And the manager of the Bank of America, I think Herman Perry was his name, spoke up and he says, "I know a young man that's a very good public speaker." And Roy Day, who was chairman of our committee, asked him, I'll never forget this, asked him, he says, "Is he a Democrat or Republican?" And Perry says, "I don't know." But he says, "I can find out. His mother lives here." So he went to the phone, called his mother. No, she says he's a Republican.
The young man was Richard Nixon. Herb Klein was a reporter.
Dick Nixon, in talking to Herman Perry, described himself as a progressive liberal. And I guess that was what he termed a new term for conservatism.
Lee McNitt was a banker in Whittier.
And the timing was what really sold Nixon. Here's a young, handsome naval officer with a beautiful wife, solid citizen, hard worker.
He had intended to run as Lieutenant Commander Richard M. Nixon. Soon after he got out, he found that the enlisted men far outnumbered the officers, and so the change was to buy a suit.
Freshly attired, Nixon jumped into the fight, all guns blazing.
I was running in 1946 just as most Republicans were that year on the slogan of had enough price controls, rationing, and all the rest. I was taking on Jerry Voorhees, a very popular incumbent who had held the office for 10 years. Nobody had ever come close to him before.
The 12th district sprawled east of Los Angeles. Valley towns like San Gabriel, Monrovia, Whittier, Claremont. The district had been represented for 10 years by Jerry Voorhees, a New Dealer and one-time socialist. Now strikes and peacetime shortages had become his millstones. Democratic Congressman Chet Hollifield, who backed Voorhees, saw the problem.
You had to go up against a certain amount of charges that were made by extreme conservatives, questioning the patriotism of everybody that was a member of a labor union.
The CIO was a particular target because at that point it was known that the CIO leadership had been infiltrated by communists.
Voorhees knew that the CIO's Political Action Committee, or PAC, was too pink to be practical, and in the spring had written them a letter refusing their support. He didn't get it. But that didn't deter Richard Nixon. He wrote a letter of his own to his supporters promising to wheel out the big guns. Now, in September, in the first of 5 debates, Nixon unlimbered his big guns and hit Jerry Voorhees right between the eyes.
He tricked Voorhees into saying that he was not supported by a PAC, a Political Action Committee. Nixon then said, "You are supported by the PAC," pulled out of his pocket a paper, went across the stage, put it in front of Voorhees, and the congressman could see that the story said Voorhees endorsed by the PAC, and he looked at it and sort of wondered what he should say.
Voorhees was right. He was not supported by the CIO's communist-influenced committee, but he was endorsed by a National Citizens PAC whose leadership was much the same as the CIO's. Nixon exploited the confusion.
After the debate, the audience, a lot of the members of the audience, gathered on the steps and were talking over the debate. And Jerry came over to see me. He'd talked to some of the people, and he came over to see me, and he said, "How did I do, Chet?" And I said, "Jerry," I said, "he killed you."
If you want to call it red baiting or whatever you want to call it, mere exposure to the fact that he had been endorsed by the communist groups didn't help Mr. Voorhees whatsoever.
Voorhees was stuck in the mud and he couldn't get loose. He had repudiated communist support, but he stood by his liberal record. It was no match for the deep Republican pockets.
I suppose, in all fairness, you'd have to say that the business people, the bankers and the lawyers, they were for Nixon. And things like human rights and things of that kind were not important those days.
Certainly no campaigns that I knew of at that time was as dirty as that campaign, and as cleverly hurtful to the opponent. It was a kind of a unique campaign.
Richard Nixon won nearly 57% of the vote. He had found his way.
After 14 years, the Democrats were no longer the power in the House and the Senate, and nobody was more surprised than the Republicans, who didn't expect to win quite that big. But they adjusted. Come back to the fall of 1946 and where it landed.
We'll be right back.
You've trained, prepared, psyched yourself up. Now, there's no turning back. So grab your Cold Coors beer, survival food, and get ready to join the elite, America's professional couching staff. But you'll need the right equipment. So look for the special Coors and Coors Light couching staff display at your favorite store. And get ready to couch like you've never couched before.
The Big Easy is easy to love. Siskel and Ebert of the Movies calls it one of the most remarkable movies of the year. A great American movie.
Who made bullets bounce off me?
People magazine says, ooh-wee. One scorchingly sexy movie. Dennis Quaid and Ellen Barkin in star-making performances.
Careful you say that, too.
The Big Easy, rated R. Now playing in select cities. Starts Friday nationwide.
This teenage girl had her father killed because she says he sexually abused her. Should she go to jail?
He just came to me instead of my mother.
Watch 2020 next.
Welcome back to our world. Let's play What If. What if Jerry Voorhees had beaten Richard Nixon? What if Dr. Spock had never written his book? What if Pesky had thrown Slaughter out at the plate? Well, think about what might have been while we look at what really happened.
16 days after the 46 congressional elections, John L. Lewis and the United Mine Workers shut down the coal industry, and soon lights began to dim across the country and stayed that way until December 7th when Lewis called off the strike. In 1987, America does not run on coal. The United Mine Workers has about half the membership it had in 46, and about a quarter of those are out of work.
One communist among the... In 1950, Senator Joe McCarthy went hunting for communists in the government. He never found any, but he ruined many careers in the process. He was condemned by the Senate in 1954 and died disgraced in 1957.
Richard Nixon and John Kennedy met in presidential debates of 1960. Kennedy won the election, but in 1968, Nixon triumphed and became president. He lasted 6 years before his habit of dirty campaign tricks caught up with him. In 1974, he became the first president forced to resign from office.
A lot of the first generation of Spock babies grew up to protest the Vietnam War, or fight in it. Dr. Spock himself often led the protests. And he is still on the barricades at 83. Last January, he was among more than 100 people arrested at an anti-nuclear protest in Florida.
The prosecution of war criminals, started at Nuremberg, has not ended. In 1987, the U.S. returned Karl Linus to the Soviet Union, where he was convicted of war crimes. And Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, will stand trial in France.
Wernher von Braun and his V-2s have been succeeded by nuclear missiles and by the American space program. If it's now possible to kill from anywhere on Earth, it's also possible to explore beyond the Earth and to discover and to wonder at the works of man.
Outside Philadelphia, Bryn Gwelet, a post-war experiment in cooperative living, still survives. In 1987, nearly 75 families lived there. But co-op, to most of us, has come to mean an undersized, overpriced, big city apartment.
The Best Years of Our Lives won 8 Academy Awards, including Harold Russell's for Best Supporting Actor. This year, Marlee Matlin won for Best Actress for Children of a Lesser God.
I tried to call your mother.
She cannot hear. Like Harold Russell, she works and inspires.
Come on, wait, like I can't.
A critical error by Bill Buckner of the Boston Red Sox made him the Johnny Pesky of the 1986 World Series. The Mets won, and once again, October's victory belonged to the other guys. All the Sox could do was stand there and adjust to the period at the end of the sentence.
Well, there it is the way it was in the fall of 1946. By the time I got to college the next year, the veterans were part of the fabric, and I can guarantee you that one runny-nosed teenager learned as much from them as he did from his classes. The vets had no patience with nonsense like hazing or the history of weaving. You didn't find many in the glee club. They worked hard, they played hard, and they had a sense of balance, and they helped colleges maintain a sense of balance, as would the Korean vets and the Vietnam vets in years to come. The GI Bill has helped a lot of people besides the guys who draw the checks. And some of us didn't have to fight a war to get it.
There were moral questions raised by the trial at Nuremberg in 1946 that bear raising again in 1987. None of them has to do with whether what Hitler and his Nazis did was anything other than wrong. Horribly and forever wrong. But if the killing of innocent people in the name of Nazism was wrong, was it right if it was done in the name of freedom? Is it ever? Nuremberg was, in a way, a monument to the innocent. There is another, and on it are these words: rest in peace. The mistake shall not be repeated. That monument is in Hiroshima. And so it goes.
Also in the fall of 1946,
Britain's biggest troop ship became the world's biggest luxury liner when the Queen Elizabeth made her maiden commercial voyage from Southampton to New York.
Eversharp put out a retractable ballpoint pen for $25. They had a 14-karat gold one that cost $100.
Philip Morris advertised that its cigarettes were pasteurized for purity.
Bess Meyerson, Miss America of 1945, married businessman Alan Wayne.
Bandleader Artie Shaw and actress Ava Gardner were divorced. He for the 4th time, she for the 2nd.
General Vinegar Joe Stilwell, Gifford Pinchot, former governor of Pennsylvania, and racing driver Barney Oldfield died.
The United Nations General Assembly met in New York for the first time. For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
If you can read, volunteer. Help someone who can't.
A weekend of movies that are out of this world. Saturday, Bond's back on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Then on Sunday, it's the motion picture spectacular, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The weekend...